Well, good morning and welcome to the E101 Cultivating Readiness, How to Prepare and Handle Environmental Spills and Emergencies in Agriculture. We are really glad you're joining us for this agricultural gathering. Hello, my name is Julia Wickard. I know many of you listening and watching today, we're really glad you're on. I currently serve as the Assistant Commissioner and Agricultural Liaison in the Office of Program Support here at the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. We welcome you to today's program. Agriculture is an important industry here in the state of Indiana, and providing information to farmers, business, and industry is the duty of state government. Farm operations manage a variety of chemicals and other materials safely every single year. This can include pesticides, fertilizers, fuels, oils, manure, and crop residues. Proper management of these materials can reduce the potential for spills. Today's program is a true partnership of having all of the right parties around the table at the same time. And so we're really glad you've joined us. To get us started, I do want you all to know that we are recording today's presentation and training, and it will be made available afterwards on the IDEM YouTube channel. So no Zoom meeting is ever complete nowadays, right, without that ever important list of housekeeping items. So here are just some reminders. We ask you that you don't use the feature to raise your hand, that our chat is enabled, and if you have questions either for myself or any of our panelists, our moderator, who is Tracy Barnes, who you'll hear from in a few minutes, we will actually be monitoring the chat feature, and we'll be able to queue up those questions so we can ask them to the presenters. We do ask today that you stay muted on your microphone and that your cameras are off during presentations in order to avoid any distractions. We would ask, though, if you could take just a couple minutes and edit your name by hovering over your picture, and then you just right-click on your picture and you'll see the option to rename yourself. Zoom does a lot of different things, and sometimes it abbreviates your name. So if you would like to do that, we would love for you to do that as well. Before we get started, we will take a 10-minute break for necessities. We have two 10-minute breaks scheduled for today's program, and we'll do one early, and then we will do one midway through following Extension Educator Scott Gabbard's presentation, and then right before the technical panel. There could be times where we may want to call upon you, and so if you're just called upon, we just ask that you unmute your microphone and you turn on your camera. So let's get started. On behalf of IDEM's Office of Land Quality Emergency Response and the IDEM Compliance and Technical Assistance Program, or what we call CTAP here at IDEM, I'd like to welcome you to our program. We have a great program planned for you with great partners from IDEM, Premier Ag, Purdue Extension, the Office of the Indiana State Chemist, and the Indiana Department of Homeland Security. As the agricultural liaison for the agency, many times I hear from the industry about topics that would be of interest for education, information, and training purposes. Today's program is an example of that outreach and that regular communications that I have with the industry. IDEM is pleased to present it today to all stakeholders who want to learn more about spills, spill management, and preparedness. The unique piece about today's program is that we are offering PARP credits to those attendees that requested them. Throughout the presentations today, for those of you who have requested PARP credits, you will receive and you will be seeing a display of numbers. We just ask that you have your pen or pencil ready, and you will be taking down these numbers that ultimately will form a code that you will submit at the end of the program. Because we're offering PARP credits, I want to send a special shout out to our friends at the Indiana Soybean Alliance and the Indiana Corn Marketing Council, who are sponsoring those PARP credits for farmers and applicators today, so that continuing education can be free to those. So thanks to our friends at Indiana Corn and Indiana Soy. The environmental education for regulated entities, or what we call here at IDEM E101, is a free training series offered by IDEM's CTAP program. It is designed to educate and inform individuals that work on environmental issues in business and industry, but it's really open to anyone. The goals of these trainings are to assist environmental managers and stakeholders to understand current state and federal environmental regulations, determine how those regulations apply to them, and then ultimately demonstrate how to implement those practices that strengthen that environmental compliance and those sustainability efforts across our state. CTAP will have a presentation later on in our program. Today's program will include a risk manager's perspective, a discussion about spill response notifications and response strategies, and a conversation about spill response planning. For this particular program, as I said earlier, we partnered with Purdue Extension, and a pesticide safety and storage overview will be presented right just in time for spring planting season. We will wrap up our webinar with a technical panel comprised of expertise from IDEM, the State Chemist Office, the Department of Homeland Security, and Premier Ag. You will also, as I said, hear more about our CTAP program and how we can help your farm or facility moving forward from today's program. We look forward to the discussion. Our first speaker is Jerry Boger, who is the Safety and Risk Manager for Premier Ag. Premier Ag is a farmer-owned cooperative that was founded in the early 1920s and is headquartered right here in Indiana. Following Jerry's presentation, Tracy Barnes will moderate and field those questions. I'll be on the program the entire time and will join you at the end. So with that, I'll introduce Jerry Boger and we'll move through the program. Thank you.
Good morning. So I've got 34 years experience in the co-op system, with the last 24 as a environmental health and safety emergency response employee on staff to basically help with any of our company related spills, but also there in case one of our customers are in need of assistance, not knowing who to call and who to contact. There's several ag retailers in the state, co-ops and non-co-ops, that have someone at my level on staff for their companies that would also be available to the customer to be able to come out, give them, if they don't have a portfolio with things that we're going to discuss today, to be able to assist them on who to call, the regulatory, and then be on site if you wanted to be like the liaison or buffer between the regulatory person and yourself dealing with the incident. So, you know, you never know, accidents are going to happen. We try to plan for them. We try to do different things, just like you guys plan for what you're going to put out next year, what you plant this year in rotation, or you keep maintenance on your vehicles and your tractors and equipment. You try to come up with an idea or a plan if something would happen on site or off site in a field or on transportation to a field, what would happen, or who would I call? And do I have the resources available? And if I don't, who does that I could rely upon? In a situation like this, where product was being dispensed in a semi-trailer that wasn't connected, it was dolly down, and it was actually sitting next to the truck on the left. That truck was there now to help offload after it rolled over. So the dolly didn't hold the trailer upright in the soil when it started getting the product. In a situation like this, if you're the driver, or say one of your employees, farmhands, are the driver, who are they supposed to call? What's the first call, or what's the first thing they're supposed to do? You see a wrecker involved, you see a backhoe there. Knowing farmers or neighbors in your area that could have a little backhoe, track hoe. It doesn't have to be big stuff, just something that you can put a small dam of soil right there in the ditch area to help mediate and try to slow the release so it doesn't go off site into a waterway. You also, would be nice to have the larger companies in case it was, a catastrophic type release where you needed triaxles and track hose to and move a lot of large amounts. But on all these spills, what you do in the first 15 minutes speaks volumes on how the overall spill will end up. The quicker you can react, quicker you can contain and communicate back to the plant and get the resources out there is very valuable. In this situation here, think about it. If it looks like a 2-lane highway and the 1 lane is completely covered in corn, what would you do to help mediate or stop other cars from going through that? It would be like going through a snowdrift or extensive, it could cause an accident. A lot of times you report it to the NDOT or county highway, depending on the road. They may show up or the police may show up, but the police is only going to offer assistance for a short time on traffic control. It's going to be up to you or having someone there being able to control the traffic and radio back and forth to let people go through. And then there's different amounts of time, like if it's on an interstate, you're limited on how long the interstate can actually be shut down without having extensive reporting. State roads are similar and county roads are a little different, but knowing this information or knowing where to find this information and having it in a plan ahead of time is very beneficial. This is a picture that some of you might remember. April 2019, a farmer from Wisconsin was moving his toolbar and ammonia wagons clear up on the north side of Chicago. It was close to the the Illinois-Wisconsin line. In that particular case, he was driving on public roadway with his transfer hose connected to the toolbar, and the valves on the tank were still open, which is illegal to do in Indiana. And in Illinois, you want to disconnect everything and shut the valves off. In case something would happen, you wouldn't have a release of the nurse tank. There was 37 people hospitalized, 7 were critical, but thankful no one was injured. In the people that were hospitalized, or one of the critical were a firefighter. It amazed me looking back at the video where it was pretty obvious a lot of the emergency response people were not trained on this particular product, on the way they were driving on the scene and going into the hot zone. That's something that we try to do at the local level in the state. I know a lot of the other fellow risk coordinators try to educate the emergency response people to make them aware of the products we carry and what you guys carry out to the fields. So that if something would happen, they would know how to react and respond. The main goals of a very good emergency response plan is being able to communicate, both communicate to the regulatory or the emergency response people after the incident, and also to your employees, explaining the duties ahead of time. If something would happen, what each individual and duties would be, having a list of numbers of resources available that you might need, and also what would you do on trying to secure the site? Like I said, in a traffic situation, on traffic control, how would you have two-way radios, your farm radio, or would you have employees with the safety vest on being able to control traffic while you were cleaning up or having someone clean the roadway up? And just laying out everybody's responsibility, and you may have more than one player depending on if they may be involved in the incident. So who would step in and be able to take care of that situation? A lot of times in the retail world, farmers always love coming out for further education and walking our facilities. I do know they enjoy that on a lot of farm accounts, just being able to know what's in your warehouse, what's in your shop, where's the power cutoff located, getting those responsibilities out there and being able to communicate to their employees as the other firefighters, emergency response people. Just having that notification and being able to notify each other, having, in a situation where if it was at the farm, where are you going to meet off-site? Where's that designated emergency meeting location? Sometimes it may be down the road, or it definitely would be upwind if you have ammonia bottle stored on your property. And then, like I said earlier, laying out the roles and responsibilities of each employee when they show up or when the incident happened, what they need to do. Communication with several agencies, depending on what was spilled, what was the amount. There's several different reporting times. Anhydrous is probably the one that's the most critical with the inhalation hazard. It's a 15-minute window before you report it to someone, whether it's IDEM or calling the National Response Center. Some of the other releases are as immediate as possible, within the first 30 minutes. Like if it's an OSHA fatality, you've got 8 hours to get that reported. And on an anhydrous ammonia release, it's 100 pounds. So that's, just under 20 gallon that needs to be reported. And like I said, knowing who to call, whether it's a state, local, or federal agency, it depends on the product and how much was spilled and where it's located, where the spill actually is. Is it in a ditch, is it in a field, or is it in a waterway? And then having the resources, whether it's a few spill absorbent material that you may have on the farm, brooms and shovels, up to possibly knowing a vac truck or someone in the area that has a vac truck. If you had to you move a large amount of either granular or liquid. And then, like I said, having just someone with a backhoe in that area and having a list of all those. The other thing a lot of people forget about is lights. There's so many of these spills that happen 10, 11 o'clock in the day, and we're still working on site 9, 10 o'clock at night, and it's dark and you're trying to get everything cleaned up. Or if it happened late afternoon, having numbers of rental places where you can get a light stand or a light bar to be able to light up the area on making it secure and safer to work around. And then, like I said, having the resources, if you need know anybody with, depending on what was spilled, it could be stored in a lagoon, or getting a drag line there to be able to apply large volumes of water on some of the ground that you may have already, a hay field or something. Just being able to have that equipment already lined out and not having to come up with some ideas of who to call during the actual heat of the battle. And then, like I said, site security on whether traffic control or just keeping people back, depending on if it's in a populated area. Having people having the right personal protective equipment to wear, the vest, reflective vest if you're out on a public roadway, or the boots and gloves, nitrile gloves if you're dealing with cleaning up a chemical situation. If need be, a security fence, and like I said, traffic control as well. And knowing what the staff responsibility is, being able to communicate, and it would be good to work through some of these drills, either as in training, but knowing the situation. In the particular little map, there's a case where it got into the waterway and then trying to find how the water moved and where it traveled to before it hit the next major river. You may need to have different areas where you do sampling and monitoring the water to make sure it's at a safe level for aquatic life. Having these field maps and so forth, it really helps. Knowing your fields, your properties, where's a water source. Several people would have ponds or waterways close by, knowing where they travel to, where the next major tributary is. And then, if there's any other issues, we think about field tile. If the field is heavily field tiled and you're trying to apply water onto that field, be mindful of that water. That ground could eventually get saturated and then leach back out into a ditch, or even if you try to clean up an area, make sure things that you're moving does not have sources where it would offload down into an area where it could kill aquatic life. And then if it does, knowing you need to call DNR, they would also be on part of your call list. And like I said, possible, getting the proper PPE, having your resources, your manpower out there, cleaning up an incident. Sometimes it's easy as if you have a liquid scattered out, you could go through there with a absorbent material to help clean the roadway and get it picked up, depending on the product. And then, like I said, being safe, maybe traffic control would be involved. And then someone with the track hoe or a backhoe or skid steer to help clean up the area. And it's bad that we have to talk about this, but in today's age, everyone has a camera that's attached to their cell phone. So social media, you have to think about the people that are passing by, taking pictures, and how that's going to portray and start popping up on people's Facebook pages. Or I've even seen where farm employees will take a picture or something, what they're doing, whether it's safe or unsafe, and it pops up on their Facebook page. And it's very poor PR for that farm account or that retailer or so forth. Being mindful of those as well. There's a particular case. The picture on the right was actually on TikTok. I think it's since been removed, but there was a grain bin, and I forget how many bushel grain bin, but there was bridge grain at the top, and that little dark spot is actually the hole, and they're using a weed eater. Two kids and employees of the farm is in there trying to break that bridge grain up by using a weed eater, hitting it against the grain. So they've added, in a dusty environment, confined space, they've added an ignition source with the combustible engine on the weed eater. And when I first saw this video, it was astonishing on how they came out of it, but what they were trying to do was crazy. So in summary, main thing is you want to be able to communicate to your employees, to the emergency response people, having those numbers on lists on a file, and then know the resources both around your location and then around your farm. A lot of incidents happen in transit, in transportation, either in the field or going to the field. And then, like you said, having the proper PPE for the employees to stay safe, and then knowing what to do if you have to do traffic control in that area, and then relaying all that information to your employees, knowing so they know what to do in the event of a spill, or if they're involved in the spill, who do they call? And basically, does your emergency response plan hold up? There's a little interesting picture of going through a drive-through. I captured this. It always surprises me on places that you see these ammonia wagons.
Thanks, Jerry. That was great. I'm looking in the chat to see if we had any questions for your presentation, and I'm not seeing any right now. So we could go ahead and keep moving on. So just to let everyone know, and I put a note in the chat that you can type your questions in at any time. Each presenter left a little bit of time at the end of their presentation for quick questions. And then we have the question session that's going to last about 10 or 15 minutes in addition to the technical panel. So don't be shy. If you have questions, go ahead and put those in there. Since we don't see any questions, I think we'll just keep moving on. And our next presenter is Andy Stinchfield. He's an on-scene coordinator with IDEM's Emergency Response Section, and he's going to talk about spill notifications and response strategies. And Andy, can we see you there?
I think so.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and get your presentation going? I'll mute myself and turn off my video.
Oh, there you go. Can everyone see?
I can see it, Andy. Everyone's
good.
muted.
Okay, that's right. That's right. Well, my name's Andy Stinchfield. I'm with the Office of Emergency Response with IDEM's Office of Land Quality. I'm actually stationed down in the Southwest, what we call the Southwest Regional Office, which is in Petersburg, Indiana. I've been in emergency response with IDEM about 20 years. Before that, I was an ag and solid waste inspector with IDEM. for a couple of years. And before that, I did CFO permitting for IDM. So about 23 years here at IDM. Before that, I spent about 20 years working for the USDA, NRCS, USDA, FSA, milking cows, farming. So I spent half my life in agriculture. And so I think I've spilt and cleaned up pretty much everything we're going to talk about. And what we're talking about today is the Indiana spill rule. And what it applies to is it applies to containment, response, and reporting for spills of hazardous substances, extremely hazardous substances, petroleum, and objectionable substances. And we're going to do a kind of a touch the highlights of the spill rule, but I would certainly encourage everyone to keep a copy of that on hand. And it's not that long, but there is some other specifics in the spill rule that we're really not going to hit today. This is kind of the highlights. And a spill means just kind of what it means. It's unexpected, unintended, abnormal, unapproved, dumping, leakage. You know, that's what it means. So petroleum, hazardous substances, you know, extremely hazardous substances, objectionable substances. An objectionable substance can mean just about everything else that's not petroleum or hazardous. And, you know, what do we got to do? Well, the rule says we have to contain, respond, and report. And the rule applies to any person who operates, controls, or maintains transportation, a facility that you have a spill from. So whether you're driving down the road and have a spill, whether you're on your farm and it runs from the hog barn out the door, or you know, whatever you're doing that causes a spill, you're responsible to do some actions. And also, as soon as possible, communicate this spill to the Office of Environmental Management. Reportable spills, facilities, water, and soil. Well, reportable spill of a hazardous substance or extremely hazardous substance when the amount spilled exceeds 100 pounds or the reportable quantity, whichever is less. And I want to make a little statement about this comment right here. Our spill rule for water and soil is a little more stringent than the federal rule, because if you see what it says here, it sees if it exceeds 100 pounds or the reportable quantity, whichever is less. So we'll do an example of that here in a minute, because that is a little more stringent than the federal rule. Spills of petroleum when the amount exceeds 55 gallons or it's in the water. You know, if it's in a ditch and it causes a sheen, that's a reportable spill. And the spills of objectionable substances, and that's basically everything else that gets in the water. It could be milk, it can be corn, potato chips. You know, sedimentation from soil can be an objectionable substance. So that's the brush that catches a lot of other things that we don't really think of as hazardous or extremely hazardous or oil. And really, this is just a definition of what a hazardous and extremely hazardous substance is. And these are all codes of federal rule, 40 CFR. Like I said, we won't kind of dig through those, but these are federal rules that defines hazardous and extremely hazardous and reportable quantities. And it's listed in the list of lists. And I would encourage everyone to at least have the list handy or be able to pull it up on your computer, because this is where we pull the numbers from on hazardous and extremely hazardous substances when you exceed a reportable quantity. And again, the state of Indiana, though, says, you know, sometimes those spills we might require more stringent reporting. And here's an example of reportable quantity. We have a release of 15 pounds of chlorine, and the RQ for chlorine is 10 pounds. You know, and maybe you're thinking, why we worry about chlorine in an ag setting? Well, you might be using it for your well, you might be using it for water, you know, purification. You might have a swimming pool in your backyard and you've got, you know, 20-gallon containers of chlorine. So this is something that most everyone probably would have. So the RQ for chlorine is 10 pounds, you released 15, well, you exceeded the RQ, so reporting is most definitely required. And you can kind of see there, we reiterate the spills of hazardous substances, extremely hazardous when you exceeded 100 or the reportable quantity, whichever is less. Now here's another example. You know, we have a release of 200 pounds of ferric chloride. Well, if you look at the list, the RQ for ferric chloride is 1,000 pounds. Okay, now again, why would we care about this product? Well, it can be used for water purification, feed additives, disinfectants. You know, you might have these materials in products or actually in storage at your facilities. So again, 200 pounds was released. The federal rule says the RQ, the reportable quantity, is 1,000 pounds. Well, reporting is required in Indiana. You did not exceed the RQ, but the release was greater than 100 pounds. So that would be a reportable spill to us, the way our spill rule reads. Spills of petroleum. If you spill enough petroleum that causes a sheen on the water, that's a reportable spill. If you exceed 55 gallons, that's a reportable spill. And you can see here in the photo, that may or may not be more than 55 gallons, but it's most definitely free product on the water, and it's most definitely causing the sheen. Objectionable substances. Again, here's the brush where we catch everything else. If it's a quantity and type and it's there long enough that it causes damage to the waters of the state, that's a reportable spill. Here we're looking at eggshells. You know, we don't regulate eggshells until they turn to mush and run off in the water. Then we do. That's an example of an objectionable substance. It releases to the atmosphere. You know, report if you exceeded the RQ of a hazardous or extremely hazardous substance, and if it's an immediate threat to human health and safety. You know, ammonia release might be that. Maybe we didn't have ammonia release that actually got hit the ground or in the water, but it was a release to the atmosphere that did cause an immediate threat to human health and safety. Most definitely reportable. And then it's like with every good rule, there's always exclusions. If you got a permit, if you got an NPDES permit, and you exceed the numbers of those permits, you know, that's not a spill. If you're doing dust suppression, which can be tree lignin or crude oil, as long as you don't get it in the water and it stays where you're supposed to put it, that's not a spill. Agriculture chemicals, if you know you're applying them the way you're supposed to, putting them where they need to be, that's not a spill. Construction, you know, petroleum for construction, asphalt, you know, as long as it's not running off the road in the water, that's excluded. Really small spills, a 1 pound or 1 pint, doesn't, you know, they still need to be cleaned up, but not necessarily reportable. And while we're on those small spills, even if you have a spill that's not reportable, according to the rule, that still doesn't mean that you don't have to clean it up. So always remember, just because it's not technically reportable, there still has to be a response and a cleanup. And again, most of their operating fluids for motor vehicle accidents, most of the time those aren't enough, or you know, that would be reportable. They still need to be cleaned up. You know, oil sheens from properly operating watercraft. That's, you know, I'm sure that's interesting, and we've all seen our boat motors make a nice rainbow sheen. And then a release of a substance approved by a state or federal on-scene coordinator. You know, if we use some kind of biosorb or some kind of surfactant or something that we approved for use, that wouldn't necessarily be a spill, even though we still might need to clean it up. And important things to look for when you've had a spill. Number one is spills that threaten public health and safety. You know, that's always the first thing. Human health and the environment, number one. Spills that enter water. If it's in the water, it's probably going to get bigger. It's going to go further. It's going to cause us more problems to take care of it. You know, spills the soil. What's happening? We've spilled it on the soil. You know, is it just laying there? Is it running some direction? Is it sinking in? What's going on? And anything that enters an underground piping system, whether it's a field tile, a storm drain, those become kind of important to know what's going on. Spills that threaten public health. There's a greater chance for human contact. This spill that you see in the picture, if this was out on the road ditch or in a drainage way somewhere in a cornfield, this small hydraulic oil spill wouldn't move to the top of the cleanup priority. But in this instance, it is in a residential neighborhood where you would have animals and kids and homeowners. So this kind of ratchets the response to that spill up to more urgent. It's not that the spill's that urgent or the material, but where it's at causes it to be, you need a quicker response. Spills to water. You're spilling something in water. What's the water doing? If you spill it in a pond or standing or pooled water, then it's kind of contained. It's not getting away from me, but it's still bad. What's happening in the water? Is there things dying? Stress plants and animals. What's happening around you? What does it smell like? The picture on the left of the dead fish has got all of them. That's pooled water, smells like chemicals, and we've got dead animals and fish. The other photo, we've got pinkish brownish water that smells like hog manure running through a surface tile and over the surface. So, look at these things and kind of see what's happening when you have a spill. Spills the soil. What's going to happen? If we spill something on the sand, we may only see it for a couple minutes and it's gone. And then we're chasing our tails, trying to figure out where it went. If we spill stuff on clay or clay soils, maybe it's going to stay on top. Maybe it's going to just drop a little bit and hit a confining layer and stay there. If we're on rocks or rocky mixture, it maybe spreads out more. It's going to, just because it's on top of the ground doesn't mean it's staying where it's at. If it gets to a subsurface drainage, then we're chasing it down to an outfall. And spills of the soil will threaten surface water and groundwater. Like I said, on sandy soils, if we spill something and it sinks and it's gone within 20 minutes, and we know we've got some homeowners of wells out there in the sand that's not very deep, we most certainly could cause a problem. Underground piping. If there's an opening, there's an outlet. And, for a lot of times something runs in a drain and a lot of folks just think it disappears. It's like the magic pipe. Well, it comes out someplace. And a lot of time we don't know where these outfalls are. So just like I think Jerry mentioned in his presentation, and I think Brian will too, in planning, it's always good to know where all the outfalls are. Everyone usually can find the inlet, but the outfall's always hard to find. And then we've had trouble. If you spill something in combined or sanitary sewer, call the wastewater utility, because then you've got the opportunity, or not the opportunity, but you run the risk of upsetting their plant and causing them a lot of problems too. Now we'll talk a little bit about how this applies to agriculture. And you can see from the bank of pictures here that a lot of it is transportation. Not all of it, but when you guys start moving around, things start happening. And that's when a lot of these releases happen. And here's how it starts for us. This would be a typical call. Someone calls into the spill line and says there's blue coming out of a field tile and it just looks funny. So we go out there, we locate the tile. It looks like Windex, it smells like ammonia, and it's the ammonia content of whatever that is well beyond the capacity of my field screen kit. So this is how things start when we're looking at spill investigation. So we drive around the neighborhood. Some of it's pretty straightforward. And about an estimated 1.5 miles from the outfall, that tile, there's blue staining at the ag supplier's parking lot. You know, I'm not sure what's going on, but that kind of looks suspicious. And most definitely something blue happened at this facility. There's pooling, bigger pools in the gravel lot, and there's blue water in their secondary containment around their tanks. And basically what happened here was they used blue dye to check for leaks in their tanks, and decided to dump the whole tank once they were done. And it had residual ammonia. And you know, that was just kind of the wrong thing to do. And in this instance, we had to clean up a little bit. And this one actually was an enforcement action, because just because of the way it was done. You know, not to say that they were thinking bad to begin with, but it ended up bad. This is another type of spill. Maybe it's a little bit different, but we have them. This was an aerial application of fungicide. You can see right off the bat that the fuel that was left in the plane had already burnt the grass. And you can also see there's a lake that we're right on the shoreline of. And we're not sure at this point in time what happened to his load of fungicide. How far along was he in the spray? We're not 100% sure. You know, we really don't know what happened to what he was carrying on the plane. We can see the fuel spill. We can't see the other. You know, we had the boom near the site for the fuel spill from the plane. And you can also see we're kind of on we're at a conservation club on their lake, and that's a swimming area. So, you know, we're trying to make sure we don't get fuel in the lake. And then we collect samples for the fungicide and do all that. And, you know, we determined that there is none in the lake. And really what we think happened there, which if I can remember correctly, when he was spraying and he clipped the power lines, I think there's a mechanism that they can dump their load or whatever they've got left if they're in trouble. And I think he actually dumped whatever he had left once he got himself into trouble before that happened. And again, these things never happen, you know, when it's the right time. This is a 4th of July weekend in a residential area on a busy road. And, you know, these poly tanks fall off in these people's front yard, and it's like a bomb going off. And then you've got 28% nitrogen running 5 different directions. And if you look at the photo on the right, that's actually 28% nitrogen on a front porch. You can see the planter there. The house was splattered. The yard was covered up. It was all over the place. And this is another one that we had to start, and we did start immediately. We got the closest backhoe and trucks that we could find and started working. You know, we're in a residential area. You know, if this would have been out in the countryside someplace, we probably could have responded. I'm not going to say slower, but we could have done a less, not going as fast, because we could have had some time. This was in a residential area on a busy street, busy road. We had traffic shut down all the way back up to Highway 41 for about 6 hours. And so this one we cleaned up immediately all the way till the end. And again, you know, we're flushing to a point, we're collecting with the vac truck. We actually take that product back to his farm. He had a dairy farm. We put it in his lagoon. We didn't have to do any special, disposal or anything, but we took it back to him. He could reuse his product. The soil and everything we dug up went back to him also. And then, you know, we've got our favorites, manure. Manure comes in all shapes and sizes and forms and all kinds of good places. But, you know, we got a picture here of someone that's done a pretty decent job with their pile that's out in the field. You know, as long as it's not there forever, that'll work for a little bit. The other photo we got here is a riser that's hooked to an underground plumbing system that you can actually hook a traveling gun to and they've had a problem there subsurface. So, you know, they didn't realize that they were losing manure under the ground through their piping system until it was in the creek. But usually with manure, it's not a real technical cleanup. We try and either dam up the areas or just pull as much volume as we can out of the water that it's spilt into and put it back where it needs to be. And that's either back into a lagoon or a pit under the barn, or in this case, we pull it out, put it right back on the field where it was going anyway. So like I said, these aren't really that technical, and you can reuse those products. Again, piles of manure. You know, this pile on the left, you know, it's been running off. It ran right to the riser pipe that's laying there, broke off too, right into a subsurface drain. You know, that's not a good way to store manure, and it causes problems. And we'll be out there to ask you to clean those up. More manure here. This is actually a good idea on the front end. You know, this isn't a bad gate valve. It's pretty decent. It actually, that's the outfall to the subsurface drain system around the hog barns at this facility. So it was designed pretty decent, but it doesn't really work that well when someone comes down and opens up the gate valve. And in this case, I think the guy told me the cows did it, but I don't see any cow tracks anywhere in that mud there. And I didn't see any cows within a quarter mile of that pipe and that knife valve, but that's what we were told. Again, good system in place, would have done some good, but someone decided to open the valve, then it was of no use. And then again, our brushstroke of objectionable substances. That can be everything else you can get in the water that can cause a problem. And in this case here, this sounds kind of gross, but that's turkey parts. That's a truck that was going to from a turkey processing plant to a recycler, and he didn't make it. And again, that's not a hazardous substance. That's not an extremely hazardous substance. That's not petroleum, but that is an objectionable substance.
Thanks, Andy. Stay on the line. We do have one question in the chat for you. And
Okay.
it is, what's the most common reportable spill you've seen in the ag community?
The most common, I mean, manure's got to be probably in the top, and then after that, anhydrous or fertilizer. So fertilizer in general, and manure is a fertilizer. So fertilizer would be what I would say.
Oh, okay. Let's see any other questions, but one question I had as I was listening to your presentation, you had mentioned that one instance where you had the manure spill and they had pointed to maybe some cows being there. You couldn't see any cow footprints, but if you had, is there an exemption for that, or is that also reportable? I just wondered.
No, that still would have been reportable, and that still would have been a spill. It's just the fact that maybe that could have still been looked at as more of an accident or something. Well, when you actually go out there and push the valve down and open it, and the cows don't do it, it elevates the way we view what happened there. It's not against the statute to have a spill. It's against the statute. You break the statute when you don't report it and you don't clean it up. And if you do something intentional, that's another level that gets layered in there. And that, like I said, a cow could have rubbed on that and opened it. I can see that happening. It didn't happen in that instance.
Mm-hmm. Just something you would take into account.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions. I don't see any. So we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule, which is not a bad thing. I'm going to go ahead and before we take our first break, I'm going to put some information up for our folks that are joining us for PARP credits. Have a couple slides to share with you. So if you have your pencil and your paper handy, now's the time to grab that. And we've got a couple of things for you to write down. The slide that's on the screen right now includes the event number. So that number at the top is the one that you're going to write down. And I'll give you a minute to write that down. And while we're doing that, again, we want to thank the Soybean Alliance and the Indiana Corn Marketing Council for helping us out with the sponsorship for the PARP credit fee.
You're muted, Tracy.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Okay, and I don't know when I cut out, maybe when I put the slide up.
I think so. I think you need to start over.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, so this is the information for our folks that are interested in the PARP credits. The number at the top is the event number, and you'll want to write that down. If you've got your pencil and your paper handy, as Scott asked you to do in the email that he sent yesterday.
You may want to say that number out loud in case folks are on their phones.
Oh, that's a good suggestion. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm going to have to lean over. So pardon me. It's 217-300-60. So I'll say it again, 217-300-60.
Thank you, Tracy, for a phone user.
You're welcome. Thank Jennifer. She thought of it. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. And this is the part of the 12-digit password that you'll need to enter in. So the first 4 digits of the 12-digit password is 1543. So again, that's 1543. Okay, and I think everybody's probably got that at this point. We're going to go ahead and start our 10-minute break. So I have exactly 11 o'clock on the dot. So we'll rejoin at 11:10.
You're muted.
Brian, please unmute yourself.
If you see your picture, you see it?
Got it. I'm unmuted.
Yeah. Thanks all. We're dealing with the technology here and getting Brian set up. We're just at the end of our break time, and Brian was just getting ready. So we're going to be joined now by Brian Smith, who is an on-scene coordinator with our emergency response section, and he's going to talk about developing an emergency plan. So take it away, Brian.
Tracy.
All right.
Oh, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. We did have a question from the last presentation.
We did, and I jotted that down.
Okay.
Because I think that's more for Andy. So we're going to have
Okay.
a 10-minute question and answer session for our first presenters. So we'll bring Andy and Brian and Jerry back on, and we'll follow up. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Jennifer. So if anyone else has any questions about anything previously, go ahead and put them out there. We've got the 10-minute question and answer session, and then we also have some time with the technical panel. So we've got lots of time for questions. Don't be shy. Thank you. And go ahead, Brian.
All right. Good morning. My name's Brian Smith. Thank you for the introduction. I don't have the extensive ag background like Jerry and Andy do, but I've been here since 1994 dealing with spills. I have been a public license applicator in several categories over the years, though, from 1993 when I worked at Health Department until last year. I'll blame the COVID on that for lapsing my my hours that I needed. But I've been licensed in category 1, 3A, 3B, 5, 8, 15. I think he even pulled off a fumigation once. But anyway, we're going to jump into this whole discussion is about pre-planning. The title of the presentation is How to Develop an Emergency Response Plan. I'm sure all of you have in your mind, everybody has their own plan. A lot of you have it in your brain. But I would encourage you to go ahead and start writing a plan out. It'll help you, it'll make your plan better, and you'll be surprised at 3 in the morning when you have to deal with something when you're not quite awake. You'll be glad to have something in writing. So I'd encourage you to take a few notes. We're going to run through this pretty quick to keep us on schedule. So as far as writing an emergency plan, I mean, there's a lot of tools you can use this day and age, but the most important one is you and people that you have that work for you, your family, whoever's familiar with your operation. So that's really the key. And if you end up paying a consultant to write your emergency plans, that's fine. You know, though I've seen a lot of 3-ring binders with 2-inch thick spill plans. That's great. But, you know, I'm kind of, the best plans are usually straightforward, common sense, and the best plans are typically written by the people familiar with the plan or familiar with your facility. So keep that in mind. Keep it simple and straightforward. And don't lose institutional knowledge. I've been at a mini spill site before, and I've had a farmer come up and he said, man, my uncle would have known the answer. He would have known where that tile went, and he put that in, or my dad. So don't lose that institutional knowledge. Go ahead and start asking questions while you still have people around. And as is, drawings are very critical for your fixed facilities. Go ahead and draw them in. Where did those tiles go? Where did my grandpa put that tile? And that works both ways. If you're the younger generation, go ahead and be proactive and ask your grandfathers and your grandmothers, hey, where'd those tiles go? All right, next slide. I do want to encourage you to have an emergency plan for both your fixed facility and your transportation related spills. Fixed facilities are much easier to plan for just because they're not going anywhere. You're there. You know where things, we'll get into some later slides, but they're much easier versus transportation. The slide you're looking at, I mean, if you spill something right outside your facility drive, it's a lot easier to deal with because you have all your equipment and your local resources. But you need to plan on a spill from transportation being somewhere away from your comfort zone, like next county over, or just plan on something happening in a bad spot. So we'll get into some more detail there. I'm gonna run through some slides. Why should you have an emergency response plan? Well, sometimes you're required to have one, depending on the size of your facility. So keep that in mind. I'll do a little shout out to the CTAP group that's making this all possible today. That is a non-regulatory part of IDEM. Those men and women over there, you can call them and they can answer questions about regulations with no fear of them writing down your name or whatever, versus I'm a regulator. Andy and I are regulators. It's the state chemist staff on the panel, they're regulators. So I know you guys sometimes are intimidated about calling an actual regulator. Go ahead and call the CTAP people and ask them, hey, am I required to have a particular plan or not? If you have you have over 13,000 or 1,300 gallons of petroleum product, US EPA probably requires you to have a spill prevention control countermeasure plan. The state chemist office probably requires you to have certain plans. So, all right. But regardless, even if you're not required to have one, Andy mentioned that if you spill something, you need to clean it up. And it's really straightforward, but I'd really encourage, the ag community has been very good over the years about public perception. I think it is important that when you spill something to demonstrate that the ag community is upfront and does things correctly. So if you have a plan, it makes everything go much more efficient, makes you look much better, and it helps the regulators. Like when IDEM rolls out to deal with you on site and to assist you, we are there to assist you, believe it or not. It makes it much easier for us if you have a plan. And it also, the bottom line is it's probably going to result in people not lobbying for more regulations. There's plenty of regulations in government, so let's don't give anybody an excuse for more regulations. And the other thing is it will save you money because you'll know how to most effectively use your resources if you have a spill. Okay, on your plans. For fixed facilities, that's pretty easy. You need to identify receptors. Receptors are anything that you don't want product to get into. So obviously your drainage systems, and we talked earlier about, if your grandfather put a tile system in that you did. I mean, there's so many tiles everywhere in Indiana because we aren't that well drained a lot of parts of the state. But you want to keep things out of the drains. Andy mentioned a couple things with some cracked soil. When we get into making a land application, if you oversaturate it, it's going to get into the field tile system. Last summer we had a spill. It was really dry parts of the summer, and if you're putting something on it's not very viscous, not a lot of solids in it, manure for example, if you got some waste that you can use as a fertilizer, be real cautious. If the soil's all cracked, that's a straight shot down to the tile system. So I would really encourage you to work the ground first before a land application, just to seal that up. I've had a situation where rodents have burrowed into a lagoon and spilled 300,000 gallons of manure. I've had smaller incidents where Norway rats have their burrows are outside of the building, and you land apply over it and gets into the tile system. So just identify those aren't receptors that you can really, but you need to monitor your facility. If you see rat burrows, make sure you eliminate it. If you see cracked soil, work the soil before you land apply it. If you have sinkholes, if you're in southern Indiana, you want to recognize all the receptors. All right, now this particular aerial photo is showing a lagoon. This is an IDEM map that we have, and things have gotten a lot easier for IDEM because we have these different GIS layers that help us. You know, at 3 in the morning when you call and there's a spill, I can sort of look at the site and kind of get an idea of where things are going to go. So for a fixed facility, take advantage of looking at topo maps, looking at drainage maps, looking at the old soil maps, knowing what type of soils you have. You can measure distances to swales. What I've done here is, you know, it's 100 feet from the lagoon to that first drainage ditch at this lagoon system. This is just an example that shows drinking water wells that for your plan, you can go ahead and start. And I would encourage you to just get a pencil and paper out, print some maps out and start drawing on it. And you can always revise it with ink later if you want it to look all pretty. But the point is know where your receptors are, know where your neighbor's receptors are. You know, if your downstream neighbor has thoroughbred racehorses this day and age that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're going to need to notify them if you have a surface spill so that they move those horses or any livestock. Okay, the next slide is kind of self-explanatory, and you have all these in your heads this day and day with smartphones. Everybody typically has them, but plan for worst case when your phone's dead, or you're somewhere with no cell reception. You need to have important telephone numbers that you can call for help. The IDEM spill line is important that you have that because some spills are reportable to IDEM. If you exceed a reportable quantity, like Andy mentioned in his last presentation, the Indiana Emergency Response Commission would have to be notified, and the IDEM spill line is the same telephone number. We do have on the panel, we have a young lady, Madison Rowe, who can talk to you about that, questions regarding that. The National Response Center number is important, again, if you exceed an RQ. 811, when you call 811 and say you need emergency locates, be prepared for them to say, hey, we get 48 hours, 2 working days. Go ahead and throw IDEM under the bus and say, no, they're telling me I got to dig and I have to dig now. It is an emergency if you have a spill, but you still need to make those notifications. So keep that in mind. It's really, your plan should be, anybody you identify in your plan, you need to know how to get hold of them after hours. So I'd encourage you to be able to get hold of your neighbors. How would you get hold of them if you have a spill? I really appreciate, like Jerry Boger and the rest of the risk coordinators, just your ag chemical suppliers, get their after hour number. Those guys and gals are fantastic, great resource for you if you have a spill. Okay, so part of this presentation is I want your minds kind of thinking, what kind of resources do I need in my plan? Well, the most common one, I think Andy alluded to, and also Jerry, we talked about a backhoe. I mean, you can hand dig a lot of things, but it sure is convenient having a backhoe or an excavator. This is an example of a Interception Trench. We had an above ground storage tank, a release of, I think it wasn't liquid 28, I think it was 3000. But anyway, they intercepted the trench and basically established a recovery sump. And from that recovery sump, you plug off the tile, and anything that goes in that hole, you end up vacuuming out and land applying it as product or containerizing it temporarily. So with most ag chemicals spills, they're water soluble. So this photo here is showing an earthen containment dam. That's a very well constructed dam. I think a bulldozer could drive across that. That particular spill, I might get into it in a minute. I don't really have a full case study, but I'll come back to that in a second. This is the slide of that particular spill. That was the downstream dam. We have a fixed facility in the photo, and even though it is a confined feed operation, the spill was liquid 28 from a poly tank, unrelated to the manure. They cut an interception trench and then realized, oh shoot, it's past us and it's in the receiving stream. So we actually built 2 dams. So the point of this slide is, with your pre-planning in a fixed facility, start thinking, where would I put a dam downstream of my facility? If you notice on that far left dam on the west side, there's a lane that goes up in that field. Well, that was where that big dam from the last slide was photographed from. And that's just because it was accessible. So that's where we had to build it. We probably could have built it further upstream, but we couldn't get equipment in there without doing a bunch of damage. So it's just an example of, and you put 2 dams in, the upstream dam is put in just to keep clean water off, so you don't have to pump as much physical water for a while. So it's just options that you need to be able to keep in mind, tools to help you. And your risk coordinators will help you with this as well. Now this slide is the only slide that I highlighted anything, and I really wanted to highlight it because I think this is a very important point for this audience. Products are regulated by the Office of the Indiana State Chemist. IDEM regulates waste. So that's where we actually have, the State Chemist Office has a lot of flexibility. If it's a product, if you spill that manure in that waterway and you build that dam, we consider that, as the State Chemist considers that, we consider that product. It's not a waste. Since it's product, you can land apply that according to the label. And the State Chemists have been super to work with. I mean, the burden's on you. You have to show that your nutrient levels aren't going to exceed the product label. And that's something that they'll work with you, but on the fly, even on the weekends, we can get that authorization and allow you to land apply that as product. Versus a waste, IDEM regulates waste. We are a regulatory agency. So there are occasions when you cannot. If you have a spill, you cannot land apply it. That's if you mix 2 incompatible products, like a corn herbicide and a soybean herbicide. You're not going to be able to land apply that according to the label. And the most common one is when you mix fuel in there. If you end up getting a petroleum product mixed in there, you're probably not going to be able to land apply it as a product with the fertilizer. So please recognize that. Make it easy on IDEM. The burden's on you to show that it's a product. We're very open-minded to it. Okay, it's a product. Let's handle it as a product. You may decide, you know what? I've got super insurance. I just want to haul it off as a waste, and that's fine too. And you can dispose of it as waste, but just recognize that you'll have to incur the cost of disposal. Now this photo is a little unique, and this is the ag community uses a tremendous amount of petroleum products, mostly off-road diesel fuel. You guys really go through a bunch of fuel. This is an example of an underflow dam. If you had a fuel spill, instead of a complete earthen dam that we showed earlier, we would build an underflow dam. This basically is an oil water separator in the field. It allows the oil that floats on top to stay behind the dam, and it allows water to pass under it. This is usually what I see in the field. This is when this was a sawmill generator from an Amish family that caught on fire, and we built an underflow dam on the fly. Versus the last photo was a pipeline spill, and you had a professional contractor putting it in. Both work pretty well though, as far as containing oil. So here's the fixed facility. This was actually from one of the first slides showing that sump. They recognize, hey, this whole tile system's contaminated, and they literally remove the tile. And sometimes that's the easiest, cheapest way to deal with it. This particular, you could either dispose of that gravel soil mixture, or you could land apply it. Now I want to caution you, as far as if you decide that you want to handle that as product, you need to make that in a sound agronomic application. Don't go out there and say, hey, I'm going to build a lane out to my barn, or I got some holes I want to fill. You can't, that's not the spot to put fertilizer saturated gravel soil. So don't abuse that, or else you'll get in trouble with both IDEM and the State Chemist Office. But we'll definitely work with you. That can be land applied if they so choose. So we were talking about tools to help you. Old school tools are fantastic. Never quit using those. One of the best things is to walk out in your facility, assuming there's no lightning during a heavy rain, just see where everything drains. You'll learn a lot. Take your phone out there and shoot some video. That'll show you where a lot of the receptors are going to go. Know your neighbors. Trace or die is a good old school thing. So the new school tools, the main one's the internet. I mean, it is what it is. It's a great tool. incorporate the old school tools with the new school tools. So your as-is drawings that I'm referring to from your tile maps, that's as simple as your own sketches. You know, they don't have to be exact to scale, but you know, if somebody put a tile in there, go ahead and draw it in your maps. GIS layers that I showed you earlier that IDEM has will show the soil types. We'll have a variety of GIS layers that'll help us this day and age, and you can get onto your just your county GIS sites, probably Beacon, and you can find out downstream parcel owners if they change owners, and you can contact them. But again, the new school, don't forget about the old school contacts, your risk coordinators, and even ag consultants this day and age are pretty helpful, writing plans, helping with plans. All right, secondary containment. I know a lot of people pre-plan and they say, hey, I've got secondary containment. I don't have to worry about it. And I'll be honest with you, secondary containment looks good when you drive by the facility, say, hey, they've got secondary containment. One of my first questions I ask people when I get there, I said, hey, what do you do with all the stormwater that collects in that secondary containment? If they look at me and say, oh, it just evaporates, Brian, I don't pump anything out of it. Well, that means your secondary containment's not containing anything. This is an example of secondary containment failure. This is diesel fuel that he thought it was contained in. It was a sandy area up in Pulaski County. Resulted in a big dig, and it got into a waterway, and it was a big spill. This photo is the same site. I will encourage you guys to have visqueen and things that you can put soil in temporarily. This soil was all land applied as product later. They did not generate any waste. So I'm going to try to scoot on through here. I'm running out of time. As far as this particular slide showing some things that I would encourage you guys to keep. That last slide showed the sheet plastic that I referred to, just the visqueen sheet plastic, the heavy mill plastic. It's good to have, the more of that you have, the better. If you end up doing a dig, it's a good way to, you can temporarily stage contaminated soil on that. You can also cover it up. You can cover up a variety of things with it. Floor dry, you know, some type of absorbent's fantastic to have. I recommend like a pallet if you can. Dam building soil, and I want to mention this because I've seen many people during a big spill, their adrenaline's going, and I've seen excavators cause some crazy erosion problems by borrowing soil from a stream bank. Really encourage you not to do that. You just cause a huge erosion problem. So it's good to have, if you've got some excavator companies that you're familiar with around you, a lot of them have soil they keep on hand, and you'd want to truck that soil in to build a dam, or borrow dirt away from the stream bank. Don't take dirt from the stream bank unless, or just be prepared for a huge erosion problem. Sandbags are really handy to build dams. If you do that, if you go that route, you only want to fill a sandbag probably 3/4 full or less. I've had guys run out to Home Depot and Menards and buy those sand tubes weight, try to build dams, and you can't build a very watertight dam with something filled that tight. But visqueen plastic, you can lay in a creek, you can pour sand right over it, you can put sandbags in behind that visqueen, and you can make a dam pretty easy without building a big earth dam. A farmer taught us years ago, the expandable foam, pretty handy little tool to have in your spill kit. You can stuff a trash bag in a tile and squirt that foam in there to temporarily plug that tile. Might buy you half an hour or so. If you dig if you need to intercept that tile, I would not dig right next to the creek bank again for erosion problems. Go 20 feet up or 40 feet up and intercept the tile there and make a sump so you can recover manure or fertilizer or whatever you're recovering out of that. So planning, you want to plan for the worst case scenarios. I think Andy mentioned that. Plan for the, you know, if something gets spilled, just plan for it being worst case in a residential neighborhood, wherever it may be. You know, plan for, I hate to say it in Indiana, but you know, tornadoes. If a tornado rips through your facility, what's going to happen? How are you going to deal with it? Catastrophic spill. You need to know how to address the spill. I've had spills before. I had one comes to mind. A great guy. His child had a prize pig at the state fair, and he really could not be on site to deal with a spill. Just one of those days. I've had guys that have had weddings before, and they're like, I have to go. And that's fine. You don't have to be there, but you need to have somebody who has the authority to make decisions to do your spill response for you. And you can hire a contractor to do that. So just keep in mind that sometimes farmers, just like a lot of Americans, we want to do everything ourselves. We want control. You need to plan for situations when you are not there and you cannot be there. You're going to have to get somebody else there. Please confirm the emergency telephone numbers you have listed work. People change numbers, they change cell phone carriers. So just call them at least once a year and say, hey, I'm just making sure this number worked out to get hold of you. As far as your plans, keep your plans, ideally have it electronically available so you can pull that up if you happen to be on vacation yourself or gone, so you can actually look at it. If they call you in the middle of the night and say, hey, we've got a spill. Or if your building gets wiped out by a tornado and your plans blown all over the field, you can't find it. So agricultural spills typically involve water, so plan on contractors that can move a lot of water. And I do encourage you, when you have a spill, go ahead and call in favors. Let them know items involved. That'll get you some sympathy right off the get-go. But as you prepare your plans, I would encourage you, keep in mind that like the 18-wheeler there, that transport, if he spills, his saddle tanks, he might have 150 to 200 plus gallons of diesel fuel on that truck. And if he spills that, that's probably something that you won't be able to clean up yourself. That's something that you're going to need to clean up, probably hire an environmental contractor to clean up, because you're going to generate a waste. That brings me to a slide that actually I think will be useful. This is a new web page that we have going on. It's probably been online for 3 or 4 months, and basically it's contractors that get on there and they list what their capabilities are. So on the transportation part of your spill, I would encourage you to start researching spill contractors. Contact them before. A lot of them will need to run a credit report on you or something before they'll agree to work for you if you call them 3 in the morning. So consider looking at the IDEM website. I think Tracy Barnes will have some of those links pulled up for you at the end. And also the website has some other good links as well that I'd encourage you to look at. And again, this is from the contractor, and this is a new initiative. I hope to see a lot more contractors listed on this map soon. All right, so this is going to take us to our second to last slide. And Tracy, hopefully this plays. This is a video. This is just kind of demonstrating the power of water. So like, just recognize right where that black car went over, you might kind of keep focus on that for a few seconds. This is during kind of this time of year, snow melt off, rain events. And if you look closely, you'll watch something emerging out of the ground. And no, it's not a Russian submarine. That's actually a 12,000 gallon fiberglass underground storage tank that was almost empty, and the hydraulic pressure just pushed it out of the ground. It's kind of a fun slide. Just the power of water is just amazing. So I wanted to, some of you still have USTs. Some of you might have some USTs with fuel oil at some of your farms. Personally, I like above ground tanks so you can see them. Underground storage tanks can out of sight, out of mind. So keep that in mind. All right. So I will stand by for some questions. Andy's here with me as well. So I know you guys had an earlier question with Andy. And Tracy, I'll turn it over to you if you're still there.
I am here. Just rejoined. Well, actually, I've been listening. It's a great presentation. And yeah, that video at the end, I could just watch it over and over.
It is a fun video.
So. Pretty amazing. Yeah. So we did have a couple of questions that were specifically addressed to Andy, and I don't have any for Jerry yet, but we could go ahead and start our question and answer session for all three of you. And Jerry, if you got something, if we have a question for you, I hope you'll pop in. But before I get to the questions, I do want to point out that some of our other wonderful IDEM colleagues have posted some great information in the chat. So if you all aren't looking at the chat, you might want to take a peek. We've got a link to the CTAP program, to some map resources. So those are some great things that you'll want to take a look at. But Andy, are you there? Is he there with you, Brian?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So Andy, we had a question about that slide with the turkey parts.
Right.
And they wanted to know who was responsible for that cleanup. Was it the person who was hauling it, or? Yeah.
Yes, that in transportation, the transporter, most of the time, unless you got some other agreement with who you're doing the work for, most of the time on the road, the transportation, when things are in transport, they had taken possession actually of that those turkey parts, because they are a commodity. So they actually took those to use in their own business for recycle and to other things. So the transporter that dumped the truck over, that company was fully responsible for all of that.
So that's probably another important point that I've run into in other areas of IDEM, and that is having good agreements with other people. So in that case, having that agreement that they took responsibility was helpful to figure out who's going to clean up this mess. So
Right.
it's probably something that our audience should keep in mind. We had another question following up on the recycler. So what does a recycler do with turkey?
Well,
parts?
Those parts get turned into dog food, animal feed ingredients. So they actually, I call it recycle. It's a rendering plant is what it is. It gets turned into other feed products.
Okay.
Animal feed, not human food. Animal feed products.
Animal feed, not human feed. One other question about the reportable versus non-reportable spills. Can you explain which spills are reportable and which spills are not reportable?
Well, if it meets any of those requirements of being reportable, if you exceed an RQ of a hazardous or extremely hazardous substance, or 100 pounds, whichever's less, the statute says that's reportable. If you spill more than 55 gallons of petroleum, the statute says that's a reportable spill. If you cause a sheen on the water with petroleum products, that's a reportable spill, according to the statute. If you spill an objectionable substance that damages the water somehow, like I said, that can be potato chips, corn, turkey parts, milk, that is a reportable spill. Now you can spill smaller quantities and spill things in other places that you're not required to report, but you're still required to clean them up. And if you don't clean them up, then they become, if you read in the spill rule, it says, then they become a reportable spills that you didn't report.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, there's a handful of things that says you are reportable, and then, but it doesn't mean you don't have to clean them up. I think a lot of people kind of say, well, we didn't do anything because it wasn't reportable. Well, you didn't have to report it by statute, but you still have to clean up the mess. You're still required to clean up the mess.
Well, one thing I'm wondering is if you're uncertain about whether you've actually triggered a reportable spill, do you recommend that people go ahead and call the spill hotline to
Absolutely.
sort through that rather than maybe holding out and wishing for the best? Is it better that call and then you can take it from there? If it's not really a spill, you can deal with that? Okay.
Absolutely, because we can decide whether it's reportable or not if you like to. And reporting it doesn't, you know, in our opinion, you know, I know other people think different. It doesn't give you a black eye to report something to us the way we look at it. Now, you may look at it totally different. But even if you don't know or just want to talk about it, don't hesitate to call, because you know one of us is going to talk you through it. We may even come out and look at it if we can. Don't be afraid to call, even if you don't have a spill. Just call up and say, hey, what if something like this happens? We can answer those questions. We're still regulatory. So if you call us up and tell us something crazy bad's happened, well, we're still gonna, we're still compliance. If you want to tell somebody a secret, tell Tracy. But we will still offer you assistance.
And just to point out with CTAP, I can only keep so many secrets too. If it really is a reportable spill, that does have to get reported. I can't sneak anything in the back door or make it go away myself. But if you can get a hold of one of us, another I guess condition of this whole situation is that with the spill line, you guys are available 24 hours a day, right?
Yes, absolutely. Someone is responsible and responding 24 hours a day to that number. Yes.
Right. So CTAP's not available 24 hours a day. So I think if someone's in an emergency situation, maybe it's better not to wait till the morning till I get into the office and take a look at my phone. That maybe you should call the spill line if you're on the fence. Again, they're available and they'll give you a call.
Yeah, it's not a problem to call.
Good. It's what you're there for. You've been doing it for a long time and you're still doing it. So must be something working right. I did have a comment from one of our other staff, and this I think goes to Brian's presentation. So I wanted to point out that she said that CFOs are required to have an emergency spill response plan. So, and Brian, you may have mentioned that, but maybe that's just an extra emphasis to make sure that everybody understood that. Okay, another question. Or maybe a comment, and that is from another IDEM staffer. They had a facility that thought they were not in a wellhead protection area and reporting requirements are different. So that's a good point. Are there different reporting requirements in wellhead protection areas?
Yes, there is. And like I said at the beginning of the presentation, I was going to hit the highlights of what you should do, kind of get the nuts and bolts of here's what we need to do. There is different requirements for wellhead protection areas near other state properties. Municipal, a wellhead protection area would be a municipal water supply. So yes, there are some other notifications that most definitely, like I said, you need to read the spill rule that are in it, and that is one of them. That is absolutely true.
Okay, makes a lot of sense.
Tracy, this is Jack Maloney, Brownsburg, Indiana, on a phone.
Yeah.
Brian mentioned very quickly about insurance. What is the proper amount of insurance, or is there a proper amount, or what's his thoughts?
Good question. I honestly would encourage you all to meet with your insurance agents and ask to review your policies. The one thing I would recommend is take good notes if you have a spill, because there's been many times when an insurance adjuster, nothing against insurance agencies, but they tell you that you're not covered, and then 3 months later, after you lawyer up, you realize that you were covered. So just because they say no, be prepared. Go ahead and take real good notes, because you might have coverage. But I would encourage you to meet with each of your insurance agents and ask them to review your policy. That was an excellent question, by the way, because that is something that a lot of times somebody will have a spill and I'll call them and they'll say, well, I called my insurance agent, here's his number. Well, that doesn't work for IDEM. Okay, that's great, your insurance agent, but Andy and I document what you do or what you don't do. So you're required to do a spill response. If you have a spill, your insurance agent's not going to do it. You don't want the state of Indiana to hire a contractor to do a spill response in an ag setting, especially if we can handle it as a product, because if we had to hire somebody to do it, we'd have to dispose of it as a waste. Ultimately, you're going to end up paying that bill plus our time. So, just recognize that your insurance agents work, they work good for personal cars, I guess, but if you have an agricultural spill, don't just hand me the insurance card and say, hey, contact my insurance agent, because I'm like, well, you're responsible for the spill. Your insurance agent is not. Your insurance agents also do not pay the civil fines in the event that would occur. So keep that in mind. But the bottom line is meet with your insurance agent, ask them to review your policy, and you should at least have coverage for off-site impact. Sometimes on-site they get a little squirrely and say, hey, you're not covered. But I'm not an insurance agent, so Julia might have better answers and could probably answer that question better than me.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for the question. So there's another, and I think this is more of a comment, and I'll go ahead and put it out there. We may have more discussion around this when we get the technical panel online. And what it says is, if I heard correctly, tillage before land application of manure, question. To minimize erosion and other runoff, the USDA NRCS suggests injection. Or if tillage is used, to apply manure first and then light tillage followed by cover crops to minimize runoff. So as I said, that was a comment that was put out there. I don't know if we want to have some more discussion. We could save that for the technical panel, because it looks like we're coming up towards the end of our time that we've allowed for questions. If anybody else has a last minute question, we might be able to sneak one more in. And again, we're going to have the technical panel, and we will have a whole bunch of people that can answer any question. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead, and the next part of our agenda that we have is sorry, I'm looking for a video. And for some reason, it's not. I'm sorry, folks. I'm just having trouble finding my video from this screen. I'm going to, maybe if I put it on the other screen, I'll have better luck with it. Okay, let's try this. Nope. Can we see the video? Jennifer, can you?
I'm not sure what I'm seeing. It's a screen. There's something.
It's well, it may be like a tan color. Do you see
Tan.
that? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And did you share your audio with us?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for your patience, everybody. Sorry about that.
In every Indiana corn and soybean field, you'll find more than soil, seed, and crops. That's because every field, kernel, and bean represent endless opportunities. Elected farmers from around the state make up the Indiana Corn Marketing Council and Indiana Soybean Alliance. And it is these experienced farmer leaders who determine how to invest checkoff dollars.
The way we decide how the checkoff dollars are used is much like being on a farm. We would do a budget. We also have strategic goals that we need to meet.
Programs help farmers learn more about nutrient management on their farms.
We're all concerned about our environment. That's part of our research. Research can be done that will enhance production yields, which are very important to all of us as farmers.
Checkoff funds from Indiana farmers support partnerships with livestock industry organizations. The checkoff helps ensure there's a market for red meat and poultry, both domestically and internationally, because a healthy livestock industry makes for a healthy corn and soybean industry. Thanks to checkoff contributions from corn and soybean farmers, ICMC and ISA find opportunities to export Indiana corn and soybeans all around the globe. While Indiana corn enjoys strong demand for livestock and ethanol within the state, a whopping 25% is exported to global markets.
ISA has a good relationship with several countries, and the people in those countries like to know where their soybeans come from. And so they like to talk to us as Indiana farmers
Indiana's corn and soybean fields are also filled with opportunity for the future. Farmers fund research and development of innovative new uses for corn and soy, which provides a pathway to greater demand and market growth. Checkoff funds also help grow demand through biofuels, which aren't just fueling vehicles, but also help fuel Indiana's economy.
Farmers are incredibly productive in what they do. And when we produce more, we have more bushels to sell. And ethanol is a critical part of that.
Indiana is also home to the world's largest integrated soy biodiesel facility.
Checkoff dollars being used for biodiesel has been very important to help develop the product and also promote biodiesel.
Other checkoff investments include production research and environmental stewardship, livestock and aquaculture programs, exports, grain marketing and infrastructure, new use innovation, biofuels, consumer education. Indiana's checkoff programs support Indiana agriculture because Hoosier farmers grow more than just corn and soybeans. They grow the future of Indiana farm families through a strong and profitable industry with countless opportunities for generations to come.
And we'll say it several times more before we're over with. We really want to extend a warm thanks to the Corn Marketing Council and the Soybean Association for helping us out with this presentation today. Next up on our program is Scott Gabber. He's Extension Educator for Shelby County, and he's going to talk about pesticide safety and storage. Scott, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Tracy. And want to thank everyone for allowing us to put this together today. And yes, the Indiana Soybean Alliance and the Indiana Corn Marketing Council, of course, for those that are getting this program today for PARP credit, are offsetting that cost today. So really appreciate their help and support in this endeavor. My talk today is going to be talking about pesticide storage. And the gentleman who put this program together was Dr. Wayne Bueller over North Carolina State University, but it's excellent, nice review, and it really dovetails well with the other presenters today. And it's from the perspective more of, okay, so what can we do from the planning perspective, and then also overall communication amongst your local community as far as when things do go horribly wrong, some of the pre-planning that can be done to do that. The reason that we do a lot of this work is, of course, obvious as far as this planning and preparations for protecting the people that we know and love, our neighbors and our own family, and of course the animals, and then the environment that we also enjoy as well. By doing this, it also prevents damage to other things that happen as well. And so with that in mind, it's going to help in aiding preventing of theft. This planning also deals with also preventing vandalism, and then using it, of course, by unauthorized individuals in and around your facility. So with that, of course, this talk kind of spans the whole gamut of anywhere from stuff that you buy off the shelf all the way to the bulk chemicals land applied for commercial farm use, and pretty much in between. But some nice thing about that is there are some things that link them all together. And one of them is the pesticide label itself. And so with that on the label, it's going to go through and it's going to give you, depending upon the product, of course, the idea of how to store it and other things as far as general overall storage instructions. And so with that, it's going to have some different type of language depending upon the label, of course, with regard to storage and disposal. And sometimes that's going to be under general instructions as well. And so, like I know you've heard at other talks before, is that label is really the law, and it's the law that you're held to when you purchase that product. And so, some familiarity prior to purchase also comes into bear. And then I would say one step further back as far as planning your facilities too. What type of facility that you have to actually store the product itself. And so one thing that comes, some language that comes to bear with that is store in a cool, dry place. That comes along with that. And there's other things that'll be mentioned on there as well with regard to overall cooling or heating of the product. And so if it gets too hot or too cold, of course, we know that some products like glyphosate, if they freeze, and so below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, if that product freezes, then you have the whole issue of now you have a product that is not as effective as far as use. It can crystallize and settle out, and then you have that issue. So the label not only protects you from as far as how to store, but then also protects your asset with regard to being able to use it in the future. And so there's other rules that can come to bear on that. And there might be some state and local laws that might make this stricter as well. I know briefly mentioned in the previous question and answering, we were talking about the wellhead protection areas. And so there's a lot of places that do have those overlying. In our case, in my own county, we do have several wellhead protection areas because we have the city of Shelbyville. But then we also, there's a lot of area in Shelby County that also serves as water reservoirs for the city of Greenwood, and then also Indianapolis too. And so depending upon your location in the state, it's also good to know where those wellhead protection areas are, because that may change also your storage future plans. The other thing too that goes into more detail other than the label is the material safety data sheet. And with that, you can get those online. And in some cases, your local co-op or your local provider will have them for you as well in hard copy. Of course, those are always things that you're going to want to keep, both if it's a digital form on your desktop or on your computer file somewhere, and then also a hard copy in the file drawer too, listing all the chemicals that you're using. That will help with that. So it goes into more details, more specifically than the label itself. Today we're going to talk more specifically about the building and the overall location of it. Kind of touched on some things, wellhead protection areas, things like that. All of these things, all of these storage facilities are going to have some key features. And then along that, the planning and ways, of course, to reduce storage as well. So your location is going to be a thing that's going to be a conversation that you should have with your local fire marshal. In many cases, that's going to be in a rural setting. It's going to be a conversation with your volunteer fire department, the local chief, or if he's delegated that to someone else, going over some of their requirements. But not only that, is that if they're going to be the first on the scene anyhow, it's good to have that conversation. If you have a pre-existing facility, kind of what you have, and so that way they know when they roll up kind of what they're going to be faced with. But it's also as well, if you're going to be building a new facility too, that before you even pour the concrete, that the conversation's taking place, because there's a few things that you can do ahead of time that would be to your benefit and would be to their overall benefit and safety too. We're going to cover some of that here in a little bit. And another group of people that you might want to talk about is the state chemists themselves, because the Indiana state law has a program in place to where essentially if you build the facility correctly and you have the proper diking and everything in place, that you can work with the state chemist and the assessor, your county assessor, and essentially when that building is built, because of state law, if you're using concrete, things like that, and proper storage, then if you turn that in and the state chemist approves it, they will send you a letter, and then that will essentially, when you turn it in for county taxation, it's assessed, it's acknowledged, and then it's removed right back off the rolls. And so that's something that I know that some of my local farmers have done as well. And so they build it, the facility from the ground up with the idea of overall safety and then proper storage. But then lastly, because it's part of adhering to local and state law, that they're not paying tax on that particular building. So that's something to keep in mind. The state chemist is the one that has the overall oversight of that, if you will, and something to keep in the back of your mind when doing this. The other things too is that you're going to be keeping this facility away from, of course, wells and surface waters. 50 feet, of course, is always the minimum with that in mind. The overall storage building itself is that you're going to be looking. There's several different ways to build these structures. Of course, you can have the ready-made stuff with containment and everything. But also too, and this is where the state chemists and other people can be involved too, keep it in the back of your head, is that really you're wanting to make this entire container the container. And so either being on a concrete pad that's diked and plugged and no drains to the outside area. And that can help not only from a potential spill cleanup remediation, but then also overall sanitation of the facility as well. So what you're doing, of course, there's the simple where we have storage sheds, and what you're doing, it really kind of depends upon the operation itself. This would lower left-hand corner there, that would be for maybe a slightly larger facility, definitely not what I'd consider some of the more commercial facilities. But then it gets even, of course, smaller than that to where, and this might be a situation too, to where you have your main facility, but maybe because of location or other planning that is in place, farms have been acquired, things like that, that you might have smaller amounts in other places. But they do have some themes that that do carry over depending upon really no matter the size. And so it's going to be locked, preventing that authorized access. And that would be something that only a few people are going to have access to with regard to keys and things like that. Once again, this might be a conversation that you have with your local fires, whether or not they have one or they know where the access key is, that type of thing. And of course, that they're going to be, these are meant to protect, like in the previous slides, the whole idea of people, animals, and the environment. It's also something that can be maintained. And what I mean by that is that it's something that this is really a single use or a limited use type of facility. So that way it's pretty much the main focus is the safe and proper storage of the chemicals themselves. So, and as far as keeping it secure, we also have the whole issue of gated entrances and of course the limited access, which I've already covered a little bit. Other things to consider is security lighting, possibly an alarm system. I know some of you have some really cool stuff with regard to that as far as when it comes to alarm systems, and they've been around for a long time. Motion sensors, things like that. They go directly to your smartphones now. Sometimes they can give you a live camera feed, that type of thing, set up to where if you are away, that maybe it goes directly forwarded to another employee on the farm or potentially to a third party, maybe directly to the sheriff's department, that type of thing. Other things to consider too, of course, would be, and I've already mentioned it with regard to cameras, but not only cameras, but maybe even a couple of fake cameras too. Of course, if you are putting fake cameras, make sure that they look like the real deal with wires and hookups and things like that. So it's not like the owl deterring a mouse somewhere to where you actually, it's a real good fake. So where someone's looking at it, even maybe a little bit closer than they should be, that they still think that it is in operation. The posting of signs, and this is not only to keep people out, but then also to inform, and we'll talk about some of the inform part here in a few minutes. And of course, that in case of emergency, who to contact, and that phone number is most likely going to be someone's cell number. Of course, now you're going to have the area code on there as well, because everyone has, because of the proliferation of cell phones now. I know in the example there, They've only got the 7 digits and really going to need all 10. Just keep that in the back of your head. It's basically like in my area where literally you can have 3 different area codes servicing the same area, to keep that in mind as well. Of course, it's going to, the protecting the environment part is that the floor should be non-porous. The whole idea is that if a spill does occur, that it goes nowhere. And so with that in mind too, as well, is that if you have any type of drain, we'll talk about that in a few minutes as well again on the next slide, but that it cannot go anywhere. And so it really does you no good to spend all this money in preparation and planning and then have a drain that then goes out back behind the building into the ditch, which I know that I think in one of the previous instances that was actually showed this morning. And so if it is, if you do go to a containment area, if you do have a floor drain, then of course in that containment area also as well has to be sealed, and to where if something occurs, and it'd be a situation where you'd be using a pump or a sump pump to then clear out that area if need be. So we talked about the problems that they do have, and of course with the whole idea of a drain, if it does drain into an area, then of course that has to be cleaned up. And what that can be used, and what many people have started, well, what some people do, excuse me, put in their facility, they'll actually put in beneath that in the facility, they'll have that drain area, but they'll have almost like a concrete containment area that's also sealed as well, of course. So that way, if you do have a spill in the location, it drains to that drain. And then of course, that is the area that's going to be pumped and cleaned and gone in and remediated. If you're using metal shelving, make sure that you have the lip on there to contain the possible spills. The wooden coated epoxy shelves, I'd be a little careful with. This is not something you're probably going to buy at Lowe's or Home Depot or stuff, because it's more of a decorative. It's going to be, you're going to be buying a product that's specifically for this type of a use. And of course, you can use plastic trays or stainless steel trays, depending on the chemicals that you're using for containment as well. And along that same vein, you have the containment, but then you also have the issue of ventilation. And so if you're doing ventilation of the facility, so that way the fumes don't get too high for whatever reason, that it is directly directly vented to the outdoor airs. And so that can help as far as the overall safety and work conditions of your employees and yourself. And then, of course, if you're using exhaust fans, of course, that type of thing, that you would want to make sure that it's going to be explosion proof, which will come up here in a few minutes. When you're maintaining the temperatures of the facility, most chemicals are going to be between 40 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. For 90% of the issues that we're going to have is going to be the issue of freezing. And of course, when it's super hot, it's a facility, hopefully it's vented enough to where it doesn't exceed temperatures of 100 degrees. And if it does, hopefully at that time of year, you don't have much chemicals on site anyhow, just because of the use cycles in the farm calendar. I've already kind of mentioned this, the spark-proof electrical fixtures and controls. And that would be something too, that if you have a HVAC system set up to, especially moving mechanical parts that are inside the building too, that those are spark proof as well. So any type of ignition, of course, can be a problem, especially if you're dealing with volatile pesticide formulations. So real quick here, I'm going to bring up the chat. So I'm monitoring the chat as well. So this is a kind of a real quick quiz here, if you will, kind of engage everyone. And so I'm going to be looking at the chat. And so if you want to, if you would please start answering this. And once someone answers it, then I'll move forward. But which one of the following is not an important features of a storage facility? For those that are on the phone, I'm talking about question. It's A, locked entrances, B, ventilation, C, high peaked roof, or D, warning signs. That's right. So the answer is C, high peaked roof. The only reason I can think of, maybe if there's a snow load issue if you're up around the lakes, but no. As far as important feature of a storage facility, it's going to be the locked entrances, the ventilation, and the warning signs. The minimum distance between a storage facility and a well is what? 25 feet, 50 feet, 75 feet, or 100 feet? And that's correct. The answer is 50 feet. Across the board, and of course some situations will vary depending upon your location and conversations that you have. Practical temperature range to maintain inside the storage facility is what? 40 to 100 degrees, 60 to 80 degrees, C 30 to 90 degrees, or D 50 to 110. And the answer that was listed a couple of times earlier was that yes, it's A, 40 to 100 degrees. So yeah, thank you for participating in that. And we'll have another one here in a little bit. Try to keep everyone engaged. Storage rules. Of course, this, I know it was mentioned earlier by some of the other presenters with regard to common sense. And yes, do not eat, drink, or smoke in the storage area for your pesticides. No matter how safe you are, you're going to lay it down. Of course, smoking is a non-issue at this point, hopefully. And then, of course, do not store the pesticides in a way to contaminate the seed or animal feed that could also be in that area. And so this might be common sense to you, but remember to your employees, they may or may not have been raised on a farm, and even then, I know that sometimes people have lapses in judgment. So this is always a nice little employer review type thing possibly to go over. Never store pesticides in milk jugs, soft drink bottles, fruit jars, or medicine bottles. Do not keep gasoline or other combustibles with the pesticides. And I know this seems like a no-brainer. I know you've heard a lot of this before, but every year I have a Farm and Home Safety Day with all the kids in the in Shelby County area. And you would not believe the number of look-alike chemicals and drugs and things that we have, that if you just sit down and think about what the Tide soap ball looks like versus, you put Coke in a bottle, well, that looks like a lot of things too that we mix and use on the farm. And by the time you get it up to your mouth and down your throat, then you smell it, well, then it's too late. So keep that in mind too, is that never store the pesticides, especially in off-label type of containment, because it's just asking for trouble to happen. So, of course, you're going to be storing the product in the original label, but then the question becomes, what do you do if, for instance, the jug itself becomes damaged or the label gets torn off? I've got that in my own situation, to where you keep something that you don't use it all up. It's got to be used next year or something like that, especially usually in a home situation, lawn. But it also happens on the farm situation as well, where the labels get destroyed in transit, things like that type of thing, is that you're going to try to keep it in the original container, of course. And then beyond that, you would go through and take your Sharpie and then put the necessary information directly on that jug, so it removes all doubt. So the thing about safety with this across the board, what a lot of people, is that the communication and trying to remove as much doubt as possible, and then planning for things that go wrong. So the things you're going to include is what I've got listed here. It's going to be the common name of the product, the percentage of the active ingredient, the EPA registration number, the signal word, and the use classification. That EPA registration number, it seems kind of odd, and I know it can be somewhat cumbersome and long, but that really is important, because that tells you the exact product that's in that jug. And so it goes past all the other, you can actually physically go and Google that, if you will, and look it up, and it'll tell you exactly what that label is. If they have slight changes in the inactive ingredients or other things that are with that formulation inside that jug, well, then that EPA registration number will change, even though the common name may not have changed. So that's why it's important to make sure that you have that EPA registration number on there for not only a quick reference, but then also an emergency situation too that can be found fairly quickly too. So you're going to keep, of course, this area organized, clean of debris. You're going to be looking at it regularly. And then also too, I would say you're going to be looking at how you actually use the product. So first in, first out type of a situation. So that way things don't get jumbled around, and maybe the longer it sits, you have possibly some storage issues that might creep up. And of course, the idea of placing the heavier containers, liquids on lower shelves. And the whole idea behind this is that if you do have a leak, that you can actually see it. So that's why you're putting these products up on pallets and other type of structures. So that way, if you do, for an inadvertent reason, have a leak, that you can see it versus it creeping up on you later when maybe the problem has gotten too big. As far as mishaps, of course, planning as far as damage area, we've got the situation here. One of the pictures is the idea of an emergency shower directly on site or very nearby. And so the idea is, okay, if you have a problem, how do we quickly take care of this? And so, you have some carrier dilution and, of course, a first aid kit are all good ideas as far as things to have on site or nearby the storage facility itself. The spill kit, once again, that's going to be something that's readily available. But other things too, like your PPE that you have, it will not be in the storage unit, but it's going to be quickly nearby. So that way it can be accessed. You don't necessarily want to have your PPE that's there directly in it. And that'll be on the next slide here in a minute as well. But the supplies to be able to handle the problem that you think you're going to have on site. The PPE, like I've already said, it should not be stored on the site, but it's going to be definitely probably in the next building or nearby. So that way you don't have a situation where your PPE gets contaminated before you even put it on because of the spill itself, or it gets engulfed in fumes, that type of thing. The emergency themselves, you're going to go over some training with your employees on how you're going to actually manage the spills, who's called, who gets called, that type of thing. The fire extinguishers that you have or on site are going to be used for the chemicals or properly rated for the chemicals for the fire that you might have on the site. And then, of course, even from a maintenance standpoint, you're going to be looking and inspecting those fire extinguishers to whether or not they've expired. Now, I know that some people put this on a lease type system, and that's not a bad idea as well, to where you have a third party that come in and does periodic inspections of your fire extinguishers and then replace them when necessary. So we had the National Fire Protection Association sign for those that are on the phone, and that is your typical little square that you see on the back of semis, opposed on the outside of buildings and things like that. And then what it does as far as an indicator, the various numbers and the blocks, and it tells people what is on the site. And so that is for the emergency personnel. One that once they roll up to the scene, they can see that sign and know what type of fire hazards that they do and what type of the chemicals that are there that they might be faced with. So every one of those numbers stand for it. I have to look it up because, of course, that wouldn't necessarily be my day job, but it's readily acceptable information. And of course, your fire chief can help you with that as well, your local fire department. So we do have fire plans that are available. This particular note here is from North Carolina University. But the thing to do when you do these fire plans or setting up, or I would even say before groundbreaking, if you're building a new facility, is that you sit down and you talk with your local fire department as far as what are some things that they would like to see, how they see it. Because of course, experience and everything else, that they've gotten various ideas too. As far as what they want to do and what they want to see when they roll up to a scene in the case of in the case of an accident, and to help prepare them as well. As far as your records, you're going to have your You're going to have your plan and your storage inventory both on site, but then also off site as well. So that way, in this example here is that lower, you have a picture of just a simple sign with it could be done even with a T-post too. This one's not a T-post. Fire plan, MSDS on the chemicals. So that way, when someone comes up to the site, they know exactly what's there or likely there at that time. And so that way they can respond accordingly when they roll up. Then of course, you're going to have that as well in your office offsite as well. So that way they have an idea of what to do. So with that, we do have another really quick quiz. The best way to store pesticides is where? Any empty pesticide container, glass bottles, any unbreakable container, or D, the original label container. Of course, it's always D, the original label container is always the best way to store that. When a pesticide label gets unreadable, you do throw the container away following the state regulation for proper disposal. Write important information on the container with permanent marker. Request that the pesticide company send you a new product or use the pesticide immediately. Of course, the answer is write the important information on the container with the permanent marker. So that way you're not transferring and all that kind of stuff. Ways to reduce storage. Okay, so of course you're going to be tracking what you use. If at all possible, you're going to return the unopened containers. And then, of course, you're going to try to set it up to where you get in and get it back out on the farm as quickly as possible as far as ways to reducing the storage. So with key points, as I wrap up, remind everyone to choose that location wisely. And so, and not only that, but a lot of preparation as far as working with your local community, your response, your EMS response. And then I would also say, don't forget the state chemist as well, maybe the extension office too, but definitely the state chemist office, because if you set it up accordingly, you can set it up to where potentially you're not even paying taxes on that particular building, which is really in the overall expense of things. It's not that big of a deal per se, especially when you consider some of these facilities that are constructed to do this. But while you're at it, there's no sense of potentially getting taxed on them since you're trying to adhere to state law while you're doing it. Keep the storage area secure, of course. And not only that, but then also limit the access to it, and then actually put up other things to mitigate or thwart people trying to get on the site. And that can be with, of course, security lighting and, of course, cameras, both active and fake. Maintain the appropriate conditions, a clean facility, of course, clean and neat, so that way you can see if a spill is occurring. Stuff is elevated, so that way you can potentially catch things as well. And of course, if you're using shelving, that it can also hold the material in the case of a potential leak as well. Store the containers safely. Try to maintain the overall temperature between 40 and 100 degrees. And then also the proper ventilation. And like has been said several times today, prepare for mishaps, emergencies. Do that what if scenario. Realize that when we're working on a lot of this stuff, it's a high stress time of year when we're doing this. So I know a lot of us are starting to, if the rain would stop or the fog would lift, doing some land application of fertilizer and stuff already. Once, of course, it's too wet here where I'm at, but right now, but still, I know that they've been doing some of that prior to this latest rainfall event. But with that, it's a run in, run out type situation. The cleaner, the better monitored, the better prepared we are, the just reducing the chance of having a problem. And if we do have a problem, that we can respond properly. Of course, it's mentioned a couple of times today too, as well, as far as recognize your overall responsibility when this, not only as the farm manager, but also stewards of the health and safety of not only your loved ones and the animals around you, but then also the environment. So with that, I'll acknowledge again the speaker today, or excuse me, the writer of the program, and then of course the other people from the Department of Agriculture at North Carolina that helped put this together as well. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Tracy, and thank you all for your time today.
Thanks, Scott. I'm looking in the chat and I saw one comment early on in your presentation about change possibly from SDS to GHS. That's not something I'm familiar with, but I put that out there. And with that, I don't see any other questions. So I think what we'll do, since we're just a minute or two behind where we'd like to be, is I'd like to go ahead and get ready for our next break. And for those of you interested in the PARP credits, don't run off just yet. I have your number for you. It's 2726 for those on the phone. I'll read it again, 2726. Okay. I'll leave that up there for a few minutes. We're going to take a 10-minute break at this point. I have 12:27 on my clock, so we'll get back together at 12:37 and resume. Next up is the technical panel. So please, if you have questions for the technical panel, and it could be anybody that's not necessarily listed, we can bring Andy and Brian back. And I think Scott, you'll be around too if there's some more pesticide questions, but go ahead and get those questions in the chat. Thank you. Okay. I think we're the end of our break now, and it's time to bring on our technical panel. So I'll introduce them one at a time. If as I introduce you, you could turn on your camera and unmute yourself. First, we have Charlie Grady with IDEM. Charlie, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. And then we also have Madison Rowe with Homeland Security. Madison, there you are. And we're welcoming back Jerry Boger from Premier Ag.
Jennifer will have to release my camera, my video.
Uh-oh. Well, while we're waiting for that, we've got, trying to remember who else. We've got Trish Dunn with the State Chemist Office.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Trish. Thanks. And we've got Danny Starkey. Okay, and I'm frantically looking for my list. While we're waiting for, is Danny on here?
Yes.
Not be showing. Okay, sorry. You're just not showing up in the view that I have. And we had Matt Pearson scheduled to join us, and he's not able to join us today, so he won't be here. Looking for my list, and of course,
The group.
This is the group, isn't it? So, not sure if we had any other questions. I guess we can go around, and if any of you had anything that stood out from the presentation this morning that you wanted to echo, or maybe you wanted to add something to anything that the presenter said.
I don't mind starting. My name is Madison Rowe, as Tracy introduced. Thank you guys so much for letting me in on your discussion. My job here at the Indiana Department of Homeland Security, I am the SARA Title III specialist. So that means that I have a system that I run that gets a facility chemical information. So some of the big ag companies that sell out to you guys also report through me. And I also help with the spills that you guys have. That information also goes into our system. So if you have had a spill in the past, I'm probably the person on the other end of the phone when Brian sends you to IDHS. I just want to kind of reiterate what Brian said. Please don't ever hesitate to reach out. I'm definitely not a person that wants to come after and cause regulation issues or anything like that. I really want to try helping first, and just trying to get that message out, because I think people see IDHS and they assume that I'm coming after you, and I'm not. So I just wanted to reiterate that and give you guys a name to the face. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks. And Madison, so does Homeland Security, do you guys have a 24-hour hotline that people can call with questions similar to what we have with the spill line?
Yeah. So actually your spill line goes directly to our watch desk when you guys are not in the office. So we kind of work off your guys' spill line, but they can always call our watch desk number. Sorry, my lights are turning off. But they can always call our watch desk number and they can get it to somebody particular if they need it.
That's so funny. That happened to me when we were doing our practice. The automatic lights started to go off. So do either of our friends from the state chemist office, did you have any comments about anything we talked about earlier? One of the things that I noticed was the comment about how to properly apply manure. And I know that that's something that you guys deal with. I don't know if you have a comment on that or anything else.
I guess this is me. Yeah. So I'm Trish Dunn with the State Chemist Office. So yes, so properly applying manure, even if we have a spill, manure is still manure as long as there's not any other contaminants. And so we'd like to be able to field apply it. We have certain setbacks depending on what kind of material it is. And so we just need to make sure we follow those setbacks during any kind of application, either through a spill or through regular application. So solid, make sure we stay 10 feet from property lines and public roads and 50 feet from any surface water. And then liquid, just depends on how you're applying it. Injection, you can go up to the property lines, but stay 50 feet from wells. You can do 25 feet from surface water. And then surface liquid, depending on the slope, depends on how far away you have to stay from water. So it could either be 100 feet or 200 feet. So I can also help with any questions on secondary containment, any pesticides, and Danny can help also if you would like to say anything else.
I'm Danny Starkey. I'm the anhydrous ammonia specialist for the state chemist, but I do farm besides that and have worked in retail for 14 years. So questions on diking, anhydrous ammonia, pesticides, I can help answer also.
Okay. And Charlie, did you have anything to add? Anything that you wanted to share with people?
Sure. My name's Charlie Grady. I'm the Confined Feeding Operations Compliance Section Chief. And usually after a spill, you'll see some of my inspectors come out and evaluate the cause of the spill and do an inspection of the facility after the fact. But most of the time during a spill, you'll be greeted probably by somebody from our emergency response group.
I really appreciated Brian's comment earlier that if you want sympathy, just tell him you have to deal with IDEM. Kind of cracked me up. Yeah, that's how you get sympathy. And Jerry, I know that you had an opportunity to speak earlier. I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to add? I know sometimes when I'm presenting after I'm done, I think, oh, I should have said this or.
Well, you just kind of want to reiterate what Brian said, err on side of caution. If you're not sure whether it's reportable or not, it's always good to call versus, I think I had that slide with social media. It could be someone driving by, doesn't know anything about your operation. You could be doing everything correctly. They may take a picture, post it, or send it to the local health department, and it blows up something bigger than what it really is. So I know a lot of times when we're working around the plant, either changing a valve on an LP tank and have to blow that, get all the vapors out of the LP tank, we always notify the local fire department ahead of time. When we're doing this, we're doing it in a safe manner. So when someone drives by the facility and then they start getting phone calls, then they're aware and reassure the caller that what was being taken place, that it was notified ahead of time. So.
Thanks, Jerry. It is interesting how social media has, for better or for worse, has spread awareness. And also when people have questions, instead of coming and talking to you about it, or whoever's engaged there, sometimes they'll put it out on social media and it becomes a big crowdsourcing thing. Like, what do you think is going on here? And that's unfortunate. It can really help the misinformation spread. So it's a good point, something to keep in mind. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions come in here, which kind of surprises me. I would think that there would be a lot of questions given all the information that we've gone over this morning. And Andy or Brian, I don't know if you want to hop in and you have anything that you want to add to anything we've said so far today. Now I was taking notes as different people were talking, and one of the things that Andy pointed out was odors being objectionable. And I thought that's a really tough one to deal with because we don't really have a standard for odors. It's not something you can measure and say, well, you're over this number. And honestly, odors they're very subjective, but it also seems that they could be an important piece of information in determining what's going on. So while that itself is not regulated, it could be just good information. What do you smell and what does that tell you? I don't know if anybody has any comments on that. So we do have another question in the chat. Can the State Chemist Office and IDEM talk about the compliance issues that you see most often in agriculture? And I would imagine those might change depending on the time of year too. So
I can go first.
Thank you.
The majority of the compliance issues we see at farms are usually record keeping. And there are things like not having the annual analytical for their manure sample, since that manure sample is pretty important for determining the agronomic rate at which they can apply the manure. We do get a lot of odor complaints, which we generally just talk to the complainant and try to explain to them that we do not have an odor regulation that we can enforce, and that they've gotten a little bit smarter nowadays. They are also using land application and setbacks as a reason to try to get us out there. So you'll see us if we get a complaint, and we'll try to work through it the best we can and try not to disrupt the farm operation all that much, just because usually we've got a pretty good handle on most of the operations and their ability to follow the regulations.
Am I up next?
Sure.
Danny wasn't chiming in anytime quicker. So most of our manure related complaints are, again, maybe start with odor, which we don't have anything any regulations on odor, but we do a lot of staging complaints. OIST decided, we have an agreement with IDEM that OIST will take all staging complaints, no matter if it's a regulated farm or non-regulated farm. It's just easier because it's hard to track down where the manure is coming from. So OIST does all staging complaints. So staging right now is very popular right now in springtime and fall. So that's when our complaints go up. During the spring and summer, we do have a lot of pesticide drift complaints. I'm sure everybody's heard of dicamba recently if you're in the ag, and those issues with dicamba and moving off target. Application, we do get occasionally snow-covered frozen ground application complaints on manure. We do allow frozen snow-covered ground applications, but you have to stay 200 feet from any surface water, and it has to be at a half rate. So it's kind of, a lot of people don't think there should be manure applications in the winter frozen snow-covered ground, which it's probably not the best time to be putting manure out there, but we do allow it to make sure you stay away from water. I don't know if Danny has anything else about, I think we average around 70 complaints to do with manure a year. We're up to 200 complaints in the pesticide department to do with drifts and other off-target movement of pesticides. We do have civil penalties that we can assess, and all of our civil penalties go to the Purdue pesticide programs to help with education and pamphlets and shiny publications. So it's not like we're out there trying to fine people so we can get a pay raise or anything. We do try for education, for our money to go towards education.
Okay. Danny, did you have any comments?
No, I think Trish Trout handled all the cases that we normally get. There usually is one or two anhydrous ammonia complaints throughout the year, but that's usually not a large quantity.
So before Danny, we do have a question. It looks like this is for you. Is there anything in the works that we will have to have a license to put on anhydrous, like the chemicals?
It has been discussed as far as official rule writing or anything, and that has not happened yet. New regulations require that anyone applying ammonia is trained. So one way we're looking at ensuring that everyone is trained is having to someday to have your category 14 license from the state chemist office to be able to apply anhydrous ammonia. But like I said, that's not officially in the works yet. It's just being discussed.
Okay. We had a question on, or a request for a discussion on leaky loads and if those are reportable.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
We get some complaints about leaky loads, and by leaky loads, it's generally the manure being transported from the facility to the point of application. And when we get those, we usually try to get the law enforcement agency of the county to follow up on those, because they have the ability to enforce leaky loads, whereas all we do is we can call the farm up and ask them to clean it up. But it's not used. Most leaky loads are not reportable unless they make it to waters of the state.
All right. Here's the big question for discussion. Do you think that Indiana could ever pass regulations for odor control?
Indiana probably will not even consider odor regulations for manure until the federal program comes out with some sort of standard.
Is there work on a federal program for odors?
There was a study back in the in and around 2005 to 2012 to study odor.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I understand, Purdue was in charge of the study, and no real clear-cut way of regulating the odor, or whether the odor was that significant to warrant regulations was determined.
Okay. I know that there are cases in the news that I think are somewhat odor related, where people are alleging that they're getting chemicals in their home that are making them sick. And that just seems to be such a tough thing to handle, to try and address, to get numbers that you can quantify, and then to come up with some resolution to that. We have some more comments in the chat for the GHS, which stands for the Globally Harmonized System for Classification and Labeling. It was quite a long chat, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if you have access, you can look at that.
Is there a question attached with that, or is that just information? Because we do a little bit of it, but not.
I think that it's just a description to explain it. So what do you guys do with it, Madison?
So when GHS occurred back in 2016, we switched our methods of tier 2 reporting. Before, we didn't require like physical and health hazards to be added to our tier 2 reports. But now in facilities, they add those chemicals that they have to tell us what kind of things could go wrong. So is it going to explode? Is it going to, asphyxiate you? Those kind of things. And it works really well for us because it's a quick guide. Since first responders are, pulling that information, they can kind of get information, oh, it could be corrosive or explosive. So that's why I was trying to figure out if there's a question, because I can help a little. But yeah, that's how we use that information. It just helps give our local first responders more information.
Okay, thanks. So here's another question. It says, I think many of us are unsure of who to call first if an accidental spill happens. The LEOs, EMS, and towing, first responders, to clear the road is the easy part. But the next agency to call is still somewhat unclear depending on who it is. Is it IDEM or is it the state chemist's office?
The state chemist office does not handle spills. That's all through IDEM. Sometimes IDEM will contact us afterwards for consulting reasons, but the IDEM emergency response is what handles spills.
Hey, Tracy, it's Andy. Yeah, I mean, for the spill, the release, we would, and the spill rule, we would be the first agency to call. And that, we're not saying don't call the fire department or police or whoever, but the spill rule actually says you have, upon discovery, 2 hours to report that reportable spill. So, I mean, we are not first responders, and we're, like I said, you're going to report that to, like I said, the police, the fire, whoever, for sure. But you've got 2 hours to report that reportable spill. And then backing up just a little bit about odor and those type of things, questions. There's a difference between odors and emissions. So sometimes we can have emissions that smell really bad, and they are actually regulated. Those emissions might be regulated. I mean, technically, the ammonia released from a hog farm into the atmosphere, if it was measured, might be a regulated emission. So sometimes things smell that are actually regulated. I mean, it's not just because it smells bad. Sometimes they are emissions. They're not just an odor, but there is an emission that might exceed an RQ associated with those facilities. And just keep that in mind too. It can stink, and it might be, and that odor might be regulated because that's an emission. That's a release to the atmosphere of something that's got an RQ.
Kind of along with that question, anhydrous ammonia, if you reach the RQ, it's 100 pounds. I've always called the local IDEM within that first 15 minutes. Anhydrous ammonia really is the only chemical that I know of that we take care of in the ag that has that 15-minute window. And then Andy's right. Then you've got as soon as applicable, or within the 2 hours to report to IDEM. But with anhydrous ammonia, your duty is call the National Response Center and report it. The clock really kind of stops when you call IDEM on that first 15, and then because it could take 15 minutes explaining to them what happened, get back, then you can call National Response. And a lot of times National Response, one of their first questions is, do you have the incident number from IDEM? And then you share that with them. And then of course, later the emergency response officer or the emergency response personnel from IDEM on scene will ask for the NRC, National Response Center's incident number. And then it's kind of domino. Then you start calling Homeland Security or the local LEPC, but right or wrong, that's kind of, and I've always, felt like I needed to call IDEM and got them taken care of in case the health department got a hold of them. And then this is after we've called, ambulance, taking care if there was any injuries at the scene first. And then if there's something we can control, then we take care of that. But if it's, when it comes to ammonia, we get that immediately. And then if there's any evacuation, then we can work with the local law enforcement to evacuate.
Thanks, Jerry. Oh, I'm just seeing if we have any other questions that come through. And I'm not seeing anything. We can give it just another minute or so. We're a few minutes ahead on our schedule, which isn't a bad thing. Nobody wants to stay late after class. And I do have one more of those numbers to share for the PARP credits. We're going to do that next, but we'll just have last call on any questions before we move on. Okay. Well, while you guys can stay here and I can go ahead and share that screen, at least so that we can get that number out there. So for those of you that are looking for the PARP credits, get your pencil and paper ready. And our last 4 digits are 8994. All right, now say it again. It's 8994. I'll leave that up there for another minute. There we go. Let's see if there's any other questions in the chat. And I'll put it out there. Does anybody on the panel have any final remarks before we move on? Nope. All right. Well, thank you all for participating, for sharing your expertise and helping to answer our questions. And I am going to move on to the next thing on our agenda, which is a presentation I'm going to share on IDEM's technical compliance program. Just give me a second to get my slides up and going. Okay. So we've mentioned this earlier today that IDEM, Office of Program Support, has the Compliance and Technical Assistance Program. Hang on, I'm gonna try and get my slides over here. Yeah, there we go. Jennifer Collins, who's also participating here today, just doing some of the behind the scenes managing of the program. She's our manager, and there she is. And I'm also in the Compliance and Technical Assistance Program. I may have met some of you over the years. I've been at IDEM actually since 1991. I celebrated my 30-year anniversary with the agency last week. I've spent most of my career in what was the Office of Solid and Hazardous Waste Management and then became land. And I joined CTAP last year. So I bring a lot of waste expertise with me. We empower businesses with environmental compliance and assistance. It's all free and confidential. It's non-regulatory and it's multimedia. So when we say it's non-regulatory, is that we don't work with the compliance and the enforcement staff. We actually try to help you avoid that because people who are calling us do want to be in compliance. It's available at no cost and it's free, but it's also confidential. We'll help existing facilities, new companies that want to locate in Indiana, government agencies, trade associations, and industry groups. Mentioned already, it's free, but we are under confidentiality, and that's the statute that mandates us to confidentiality. And I put it there because I just really want to emphasize how seriously we take that. We're non-regulatory. We are not going to issue permits, violations, fees, and fines or enforcement actions. So those who receive CTAP services are not penalized for reporting relevant environmental information to CTAP when requesting assistance. We have multimedia experience. We have comprehensive knowledge of federal and state environmental regulations, permitting requirements, and compliance measures, and we can assist with self-disclosures. We have expertise in pollution prevention assessment, sustainability planning, project implementation, and continuous improvement techniques. And then we also do a lot of these training modules. You'll notice this has been the fourth training module in this new virtual series that we've been putting on. We have staff all over the state. We have Charles Breitenfeld up in the Northwest region, Joe Nucleus up in the Northern region. Down south, we have Heath Dill in the Southwest and Andrew Dryden in the Southeast. And then in the central office, besides myself, we have Hanny Shariah, Mark Stoddard, Crystal Wagner, and Angela Taylor. And in the central office alone, we have over 120 years of experience. We can help new or prospective businesses navigate potential regulatory needs based on proposed operating scenarios. We can provide preliminary assessments of regulatory obligations and estimated timeframes and costs. We can get you contacts, forms, guidance, development in doing or required calculations, which is important if you have an air permit, provide example permits from other similar operations, and recommend operational flexibility options. We can help with P2 opportunities. And basically, I mean, just with all of this together, it's just a one-stop shop. You can call us and get timely assistance with interpreting a rule or a permit. If you need to determine what steps are needed to obtain a permit. If you just want to ask general environmental, regulatory, or compliance questions, or you can request a site assessment. We have a new online portal that you can communicate through, and then we also have our hotline number. Now, our online portal, we just launched this within the last 6 months or so, and it's a secure online system that makes it easier for businesses and organizations to request confidential assistance. And the way I've heard it described, actually, Jennifer had given me this analogy. If you're used to communicating with your doctor through a portal to get test results, to request medication refills. It's similar to that, where you log in, and not only can you communicate with us now, but you can also go back and see your previous information, your requests that you put in, and you can see the responses that we've gotten to you. So sometimes you can't find something in your email, like I lost that email, but you could always log back in and find that information anytime going forward. So it's really nice. It's a really nice tool. It's also much more secure than us emailing information back and forth. The portal is available through Access Indiana, and there are several agencies that are participating in Access Indiana, and you can see some of them here. So if you have an Access Indiana account already, then you can just join the portal. Otherwise, you just set up an account and you'll go to IDEM, and this is the icon that you're looking for. One of the things that we really like to encourage people is to take advantage of our site assessments. It's a free on-site consultation to determine environmental regulatory obligations, compliance status, and identify potential pollution prevention opportunities. There is nothing like us coming out and putting our eyes on your facility, on your equipment, to really get a handle on what you have. We might also notice some things that maybe you hadn't noticed before. We may go out to look at an air permit, for example, but we might notice some waste storage issues that we could go ahead and flag that for you before you get an inspection and then find out you're in violation. We can verify environmental compliance through the facility tour. We can review applicable rules, permit conditions, record keeping, and required reports. It's really just a very customized way for us to come out and give advice that's just for you and your facility. We also offer training. I'd mentioned already that we have done, this is the 4th in our series of the virtual E101s. We have a few more in the works. There's specific workshops that we can do. And if you ever want a tailored presentation, we can do those as well. We can come to your business, to your trade group, whatever you like. The future topics that we're doing include environmental restrictive covenants, understanding the NPDES system from a business perspective, portable air units, TRI and PFAS, PFOA reporting requirements, and stormwater. Our website offers sector-specific guidance, regulatory updates, training opportunities, materials, fact sheets, pollution prevention resources, upcoming event announcements, and additional details about CTAP. We've also got links to external resources. You can contact us anytime, but before you get on and ask for a consultation, it'd be good if you got this information together: your business location and type, the primary SIC code or NAICS code, your core operations, equipment, process materials, products manufactured or services provided, any process flow diagrams or descriptions, anticipated or known potential emissions to air, water, and land, waste types that are generated, management practices, material storage. If you've got any existing environmental approvals, expansion or construction details, and then any other questions that you have. If you have that all together before you contact us, that would be very helpful. So under our Office of Program Support, we have partnership opportunities, grants, and awards available to Indiana businesses. And I'd like to walk through some of those quickly here. We have voluntary programs for business, and probably our largest one is the Indiana Partners for Pollution Prevention. It's a partnership organization with industries, businesses, governmental agencies, and other entities that implement and promote P2 ideas. I do want you to save the date. We have our Pollution Prevention Conference and Trade Show, Unmasking Your Pollution Prevention Possibilities, scheduled for September 23rd, 2021. And if you want more information on that, you can contact Jean Fix. And I've got her contact information at the bottom of this slide. And if I'm going really quickly and you say, oh, I didn't catch that, we are going to put these slides out on the web afterwards. And all of the links that are on here, the hyperlinks, those will be active in the slides that we post online. Another voluntary program that we have is the Environmental Stewardship Program. And it's a performance-based leadership program designed to recognize and reward Indiana regulated entities that exceed the standards of environmental compliance. They implement P2 strategies and maintain an environmental management system, or an EMS. Applications will start April 1st and go through May 31st. And then the next round in the fall will start September 1st and go through October 31st. So if you're interested in joining this program, Jean Fix is the contact for this one as well. We have an awards program. We have the Indiana's Governor's Award for Environmental Excellence. It's the most prestigious environmental recognition award for the most innovative, sustainable, exemplary programs or projects that positively impact Indiana's environment. There are categories for environmental education or outreach, 5-year continuous improvement, greening the government, land use or conservation, pollution prevention, recycling and reuse, or energy efficiency and renewable resources. The deadline for your application for the Governor's Award is April 5th at 5 p.m. And if you want more information, you can contact Cameron Machino, and his information's at the bottom of the slide. We also have some pollution prevention grants available. We have a partnership with US EPA and Purdue's Manufacturing Extension Partnership to offer technical assistance and grant opportunities to Indiana manufacturers. We allow 15 manufacturers into the program, and you'll receive a waste stream mapping assessment conducted by Purdue MEP at a significantly reduced cost. You'll get up to 40 hours of follow-up technical assistance through Purdue's faculty assistance program. And you may also be able to apply for grant money. The contact for that is Kelly Weger. And I found out the other day that we have 5 more slots available. So 10 of them are taken and we have 5 more opportunities. So if you'd like to look into that, please contact Kelly. We have a recycling market development program grant. Eligible candidates can seek a grant starting at $10,000 and up to $500,000 with a 50% cash match. Projects should focus on increasing recyclable material collection or consumption, reductions in municipal solid waste shipped for final disposal, or improving partnerships with communities through tangible outreach and education efforts. We are going to be accepting applications this spring. We don't have a start date for that yet, but if you have questions, you want to keep an eye on that, contact Deanna Gardner, and her information's at the bottom of the slide there. And then of course you can contact CTAP at any time. We have a link to our brochure if you'd like to take a look at that. And there is my contact information. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Julia. Just need to stop sharing my screen. And we'll let you do a final wrap up and give us your thoughts.
Well, thank you, Tracy, and thanks for everybody else keeping us on time. Hopefully you all have enjoyed the discussion today, taken something away from it that you can apply back to your operation or your farm. And you've certainly have some new contacts or have rekindled some contacts that you might have had before. I think Tracy is going to put up a slide now that basically has all of the contact information of the speakers that were on the program today. So this will, of course, be part of our final recording, but it also is an opportunity for maybe you to snap a picture of this with your phone so you can easily communicate and reach out to people after the program. We all stand ready to help you with your operation. Certainly as the agricultural liaison for the agency, I have confidentiality in my job description as well. And so if you would rather talk to me, kind of ag to ag, I'm certainly open and willing and able to communicate with any of you. Many on the call today and on the Zoom meeting I have worked with, both here at IDEM and in prior opportunities. So feel free to always reach out to me. I hope you'll help me in thanking all of the folks on this slide and also our friends, once again, at the Indiana Corn Marketing Council and the Indiana Soybean Alliance. Behind the scenes, you've heard her mentioned, is Jennifer Collins. Jennifer is the manager of our pollution prevention and compliance assistance programs here at IDEM, and really has championed the effort with our E101 series. And we are planning several of these throughout the year, not necessarily specific to agriculture, but to the environment and pollution prevention efforts. Certainly there could be applicability to agriculture and the farm community. So watch for those communications as they come out. I also want to thank Tracy for moderating today's program and for kind of being the responsible party here at IDEM for assembling everybody together. Appreciate both Jennifer and Tracy kind of being the wizards behind the curtain today to make sure this program was assembled well and ultimately delivered to all of you. We do have a survey because that's how we continue to make our programs better for all of you and to make them more relevant. And so we would just ask that you look for a survey in your email. Tracy or Jennifer also may drop the link in the chat. We were having some server issues this morning, so I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. But
yes, the link is in the chat.
Okay, so you can click on the link in the chat and complete the survey. We also will follow up with all of you and you'll have the link there as well. But really your feedback is how we make our programs more relevant, stronger, and better for each of you. So we certainly hope you have a great day. Hope you have a safe, productive, and efficient planting season. And know that our team here at IDEM and our partners that presented today's program are just a phone call away or an email away. We're here to help support what you do. So thanks for all you do for Indiana and American agriculture. And we will be in touch. Take care.